It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Wednesday, May 13th, 2026. Thank you for joining me today. Sorry for the delay on getting started there for those that were waiting for the start time that's posted on the platforms. Some very, very weird glitches, like just a lot today, which I'm not surprised by, to be quite honest. I'm not able to see the chats that I normally look at. I got the Rumble one up right now. I'd like to keep an eye on it just in case something develops in real time. You know, maybe you guys can't hear me. So just, I'm looking at the Rumble one. That's all I have today. So heads up for that, guys. I've got an important show. Something that I had a lot planned today. I'm going to plan on getting to the bulk of what I had outlined tomorrow. I also have an interview with Charlie Robinson tomorrow that may or may not come out tomorrow. And I still have an important, I thought it was a really great interview with Dave DeCamp that I have to put out. But I decided to put the bulk of this stuff off. A lot of it was just interesting stuff that you're probably seeing that I was going to comment on. But I came across something that looks like it came out around May 7th, between 7th and 9th. I feel like that's when it, like, I couldn't get a definitive date on it of this year. And it had to do specifically with Honduras. That's where that term comes from, of course. I'm not a big fan of using the whole gate, coming from, Russia gate, whatever, like adding that onto it, kind of just to any big scandal. I've never been a big fan of that, but that's the term they used. And I do think it's appropriate for what it really represents. And so I want to go through what this platform is highlighting, and it really connects to the larger conversation. Now, I don't want to like oversell what this looks like. I mean, look, let me start with this. You guys know what I think about the network state agenda, about what, the overlap of that with lots of different moving parts, with the Freedom City element, the Smart City Great Reset direction, the technocratic push. Even Zionism has its play in a lot of this, just on this side of the conversation. And I mean that in the sense of like the religious, prophetic kind of mindset. But then Israel's government and its own element of that, which obviously they're intertwined, is involved with what happened in Honduras in 2009, in the illegal coup that took place there with the U.S. government and Israel, as well as Juan Orlando Hernandez, that Donald Trump just pardoned and is working with to redevelop his political standing in the area. Now, we've covered all of this. We've talked about this. What I find fascinating is that this platform is coming at this from like a global angle and breaking this down in a way that highlights the long-term agenda, that doesn't just highlight or get into the Honduras part of it. That's the focal point of what we're going to highlight today, and the work they're highlighting on the one section of it. But the whole picture highlights a global transition. And that's what I'm very much worried about in a lot of this. And I think what's important to highlight is that there's more, or to point to, there are many different groups within a lot of this that want different things. And I think, as I've like with the Great Reset point, or even COVID-19, I think some of these different elements are willing to work alongside each other to gain what they can from a certain situation. Doesn't mean that they're necessarily always on the same page or working for the same thing. And so I see that in a lot. That's just important to think about when we're talking about something this large. And so this whole point of it, this focal point on Honduras, on the illegal transition of power, on the illegal manipulation of the Supreme Court to create the ZD, the special economic zone, as I pointed out for a long time, is right out of the whole larger Sustainable Development Goals, UN, even the Great Reset points. And this was done before this is when it initiated, but it has been developed all the way till today, but it has overlapped a lot of different agendas. What's important in my mind is that this is about, first of all, something that our government's been doing around the world for a very long time. Regime change, putting people in positions of power in foreign governments that will be more amenable to their agendas, if not that they can just completely control, which is pretty much what I think it's about. And so that's not new. But what I think this is a different sort of vein of power that we've seen develop on the global stage, but in particular in the United States. It's not secret right now to most Americans that Israel has an outsized influence. That's a very kind way to say that on U.S. policy. And so that is kind of what we're talking about. It's not just Israel, but it is this sort of power structure change that we're seeing, and it's not just one place. And so what Honduras represents, I think, in my mind, is the continuation of the regime change efforts to just take power, but in a different vein, like, as we said, the, end times, Armageddon, Zionist prophetic view. And I think they see this as something that adds to what they're trying to accomplish. But from the technocratic part, which is really what I'm going to focus on today, I included Israel because that's part of this investigation. And as the Israeli government very much involved, if not in control of what happens here, according to these people. But I want to focus on the technocratic side of this, rather just the, it's actually a very appropriate term for those that the globalism, technocracy, they've become kind of buzzwords today. But technocracy has a very real definition, and it's very historically tied, in fact, directly back to the people in this administration. But so if that's something you just find overbroad, they just put out what they're called the Technological Republic and the different outlines for what they're trying to accomplish. That's what I'm aiming at, is that mindset. This whole CEO-run country, all the good oligarch to save you from the bad people in the world, all the way they've all framed this. And so when we look at this part of it, this tech-led change to reimagine society, it feels very much like something we would hear from a libertarian mindset. Until you look into what it's actually doing from the top down, until you understand how it started in the first place, right? The ends do not justify the means, especially not in a libertarian sense. And so at the end of the day, what we're talking about is something that was started through state violence. And I want to go through what that means and what that actually is developing into, and what they highlight as something that is happening, at least in this point, we're focusing on throughout South America, that they're using this as sort of a launch pad to initiate these changes, these toppling of countries through pressure, through technocratic infiltration, through foreign regime change tactics. And it's happening in front of us. But I think it's happening everywhere else in the world too. Not at least the attempts to do so. We could talk about Argentina, which plays a role in this. We've talked about El Salvador, which plays a role in this. There is an effort to push their worldview and their control across the world. Now, you could argue that there's another element doing the same thing from another side of the globe. And I wouldn't even disagree with that. I wonder whether there's more coordination to something, the BRICS element, or that is some kind of a counterbalance. Just to start out the show, I don't see that as, my opinion is I think government is the problem. I've gone into that in depth many times over the years. It's not necessary for me to explain it all in the beginning of the show, but just so you understand that I think that is the root of these problems. And we can live in a world where government doesn't need to be dictating how we live our lives. And so with that in mind, I see either side of that as leading us down the path of more centralized control that ultimately controls the way we live our lives. So you can disagree with that. But what I want to highlight is that there are different elements of power trying to do the same thing. Even if you want to think they're doing it for good reason, it always comes down to the same kind of tenets of surveillance, digital IDs, and just basically for your own good, controlling the way you live your life. And I don't think any of us should be okay with that. So let's start first with a couple of points that I want to get into around just starting points around Trump and what he was saying. I think demonstrating the lack of concern for what's actually happening to Americans right now. It's a clip that you've all probably seen. And I want to get into some overlapping points with that in regard to Fauci and kind of making the same element. And then the rest of it, we're getting into the HondurasGate investigation and parts that we've already gone over that make it very important to see how it all comes together. We've talked about Orlando Hernandez. We've talked about this deep interconnection, and it's important to see this. Now, some of the stuff we put off, by the way, you might have seen that Warsh was just not nominated, allowed to be in place for some reason. I'm blanking on the word. The point is that we've already gone over who Warsh is and his connections to, he's an insider. I'll jump into it. I'll go into it right now. We'll go into it tomorrow, possibly with Charlie. But one after another, or the person that they did nominate for, every person they seem to be putting in place are people that are the opposite of what this administration told you they were going to bring to the table. And it's just one after another, or the new people, I digress. I want to talk about some of this stuff because it's just so obvious, but that's exactly why we shouldn't even need to, because I think you guys all see it anyway. But let's start with this point. Donald Trump. War on Iran. Now, something he's been really pushing is that this is about you, right? This whole thing is about freedom and safety in America. And what's interesting is that, what's obvious is that I think most people already knew a long time ago that wasn't the case, especially since the people that he's saying that to were the ones he promised this wouldn't happen in the first place. So this is just kind of one of those break moments where people who might have been going, please just tell me he's got some secret plan. Oh, it's the energy thing. He's revamping the world's energy. That's what he was really doing. And I do think that's what's kind of happening in the world. I don't think he was the mastermind. I think he took advantage of people like us going, that's happening. And it made him look like he wasn't floundering. And I don't think Trump is some kind of, bumbling idiot. I don't think that. I think he's savvy in a lot of ways. I just don't think he's as smart and master class as they'd like to make him out to be. This just simply shows you that he at least states out loud that his concern is not you, not your financial situation, even though his actions directly affect you. And that's what's supposed to guide his choices, your beliefs and your input and your desires for the outcome. But also that he makes it clear that the reason he's sacrificing those things is for something that we all know isn't the reality. No matter what way you look at this point, it wasn't the reality in the first place because we knew that and the evidence showed that and our own intelligence said that and the international community made that clear. And it wasn't the case afterward if you listen to Trump because he obliterated it all, the nuclear conversation. But either way you spin it, now apparently that thing that isn't the reality is what he says has to be stopped. Otherwise, or at the end of the day, has to be stopped, period. And that's why your prices are increasing forever, apparently.
Not even a little bit. The only thing that matters when I'm talking about Iran, they can't have a nuclear weapon. I don't think about Americans' financial situation. I don't think about anybody. I think about one thing. We cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. That's all. That's the only thing that motivates.
We're having one hell of a starting day today. You probably just saw I spilled something there. If you didn't, then I just made it clear. But anyway, just funny times to start today. What he's saying there is really interesting because I think he feels that is like the answer you want to hear, or at the very least, as always, right now, there's two ways in looking at anything through Trump. It's either him trying to do whatever he can to get you to stop recognizing that he's not doing what he said, or it's not even him speaking through his own mouth. Those are the only two things that make sense to me when I look at what's going on right now. And in that case, it could be that that's what he was supposed to say because that's what they're supposed to say, even though nobody believes him and his own people are turning on him. Or he's just completely out of the know and Witkoff and Kushner tell him that's what everyone wants to hear, however you read it. The point is that that's just ridiculous. Gabbard herself said in 2025 at the end of the year, that's not the reality. The International Atomic Energy Agency continues to say to this very point, that's not the reality. And then Trump himself said he obliterated everything. So how silly this becomes. Overall, the bottom line is he says your interests are not the guiding force here. I think people need to hear that. Of course, then you get people underneath that. If you look, they go, well, no, he just off the cuff and blah, blah, blah. It's like you can never take him at face value and it's something you don't want to hear, but it's always exactly the reality that you can't deny if it's something you do want to hear. That's partisanship for you. It rots the brain. So on that note, just to start, they're going to China. And I'm going to make a point about that, which I think is very interesting because weren't we just being told for years that China was the real problem, that China was infiltrating our country? It's the Chi-Coms, which, by the way, there are points to be made. That's the whole thing about being an honest, open-minded, nonpartisan researcher, that you can see the problems whether it's Israel or China or whatever else. The funny thing, though, is that that's what we were told by these people. I'll make a point about Benny Johnson in a minute, where they're like, yay, unity. This is what power looks like. And everyone's on the same team and China loves America now, or whatever he's doing. And it's like, look at before. You were literally going, they're invading our country and they're taking over everything and they're invading our machines and our voting. It's like, let's just, for sake of conversation, pretend that's the reality. How can you be a Benny and suddenly go, yay, look at what Trump is doing? Because they don't care about anything. Literally, they don't even care that people like us show you that they're lying. I made that point today online. It's like, I'm not doing this and posting this to make this person above me recognize he's wrong. He knows he's wrong. I'm posting it so honest people who fall for people like Benny Johnson or Eric Dougherty or Nick Sorter ultimately at least have an opportunity to go, oh, he's completely lying right now. And that's something he's completely said the opposite about. It's important, I think, for some people. Some people argue I shouldn't waste my time, but I think it's a battle out there. Not against them. I don't think they care. There are people that get lost in all the bots. But this says, quick refuel, Alaska, Eric Trump. And 5 times August, I think, aptly frames this as the poors will think this is hilarious. They're paying so much for gas right now. I mean, think about I actually just think that they're just tone deaf. I don't think they have any understanding of what people are going through because they're a different species. I'm saying that kind of jokingly, but the idea being is that when you I shouldn't go into it now, but there's a larger point you made about, genetic editing and blah, 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 and things that will over a very long period of time, or maybe not that long, create the species based on wealth and influence to literally become different things. There's people have written about it. So if people have access to money and genetic engineering and alteration, whatever becomes the future, well, they were to be the ones that benefit from all that, while the other people end up staying the same, and they become the faster ones, the stronger ones. It may sound crazy, but my point in a larger sense is just being wealthy today is sort of the same kind of idea, that you grow up you live every day, your entire life, without even knowing what it means to need money, or to ever have to look for money, or ever wonder where your food's going to come from. You are a different person. You don't understand what people go through. Think about what it means to never really actually even consider whether you're able to buy something or whether you have enough money to do X, Y, and Z. It's crazy. It's generational wealth. And that's what this whole thing is about. And this country is becoming just like all the rest of them, because that's what the people at the top ultimately want. Who's to say whether it started that way or not, but we're sure as hell there now. On that point, Mel points out for reference, Eric Trump's, and basically it's a clip down below of him kind of laughing about how much money he's making. And he says Eric Trump's net worth has gone from $40 million in 2024 to $400 million in December 2025. I'm not going to, degrade somebody for being good at their, business or making money, but that's not what's happening here. They were generationally wealthy before this. The point is he's turned his wealth through Donald Trump's administration into a money-making machine. Hunter Biden's net worth is approximately $1 million for comparison. Now it says the Trump family corruption is so extravagant, so over the top, it makes Hunter's stint getting paid $50,000 a month to screw hookers in Eastern Bloc look like a charity work. I mean, it's not even being hidden, guys. They're selling shoes and watches. Oh my God, I actually just forgot about that phone point that Steve showed me. That would have been good today. I'm not going to try to find it. But my God, if you look into this, I got to make a note about that. The Trump phone, we've talked about this. We went into it in depth right when it came out. We exposed it. Same with the Eric Prince phone. And they just vanish. Why? Because they lied to everybody. They got caught. Parts of both. Largely Eric Prince's phone was made in Israel, working with 8200. Their phone was being brought over from parts from China, and they go to America first. And then they just stopped. Then guess what? All these people who put hundreds of dollars down for deposits for these phones, they never got them. Look it up for yourself. I actually had to make sure, because I'm like, how could they possibly have done that? I keep making this joke. Like, why wouldn't they just give them the phones? Give them the ban on food dyes. Like, you don't care about these people, but give them some bones, give them some crumbs. No, they can't even do that, right? They can't even give you a couple of wins. They have to just take everything for themselves. And that's what our government does. So in this case, they put this whole thing about America First phones and crypto and MAGA, and everyone invested, and they just stole all your money and didn't even try to follow through on the bar. Anyway, I do want to talk about that at some point, because that's incredible level of corruption. On that point, though, that's what we're dealing with. And apparently, because Democrats, the only thing that's bad in some people's minds, they ignore it. See? To adults in the room, honest people, I shouldn't even use that term since it was used to apply to us during the election timeframe. The point is that people are criminal on all sides of the conversation. They can be, anyway. And so that's largely what this is relating to, is not just one side of the paradigm, but how our governments are using the divide to drive us into the new control structure. Now, before we get into that, Tulsi Gabbard, rather the Office of D&I, comes out and says the same CIA director who pushed the Russia collusion hoax for years, which he did, is now openly admitting that there are still bureaucrats inside the intelligence community and the DOJ working against the president. Wow. What's May 12th, 2026? And of course, he goes, the deep state was never a conspiracy theory. Well, just to be clear, you understand that long before Trump decided to kind of weaponize the idea of an unelected power structure and pretend to fight it, or the idea of the point is it's nonpartisan. Yes, they lied about the Russia hoax. Of course they did, but so did the other side use it for their purposes. The reality is they both hid the reality of what Israel did in this country. Or on top of that the deep state is simply an unelected power structure of people like we're seeing stack through Trump's administration and like we saw stack through Biden's administration that ultimately dictate a lot of what happens. This is just simply about trying to go, look, see, anything you think bad right now, that's because old holdovers from the other side. Don't try to define it. Don't try to give you examples. Don't give me names. Don't say that person. Okay, here's the real question. Okay, then get rid of them. You're telling me you've got a bunch of holdovers and Democrats who are secretly messing things up? Fire them. Either you know that and you know who they are and you can identify it, or you're just saying that because you want us to think it and you don't have any evidence to back it up. It's insane. But I said, well, isn't that convenient for an admin imploding in front of us? It was never incompetence and criminality, guys. It was just more Democrat holdovers. Sure, why not? Those willing to ignore the obvious will jump at anything that helps them do just that. Now, I'm not going to pretend that there's not some level of overlap of individual interests, but if you still think this is somehow left-right fighting each other in this government, like in a sense of like the real top-down agenda, I'm sorry, you're missing the point. There are people that do that. I would even argue at some point it may well devolve into that as this country falls apart. But at the moment, or at least as it's been so far, we're talking about a government using the parties to keep us fighting ourselves while they push us into this. I seriously hope I'm wrong, and I'm not asking you to blindly trust me. I'm only ever asking you to look at what we're talking about. And in this case, are we really going to pretend it's just a bunch of other people while we watch them personally break the law? That's silly. But here she is saying, stand up, Tulsi Gabbard says, stand up for what is right. Stand up for common sense. Stand up for truth. And stand up for these fundamental principles that make this country great. That it is okay. Well, I mean, it could. Any country would be great if they were embodying those things. The problem is that none of you guys actually believe that. Or if you do, you're willing to sacrifice that for what? Momentary power next to Trump? These people don't, I mean, look, you're going to say stand up for what is right, then you're going to pretend that you support the Iran illegal war. You're going to say stand up for what is right, then you're going to support all the, I mean, you can go down the list. These people act like they believe in what's right, or Stephen Miller posts unapologetically pro-civilization, as the administration leader just said will destroy Iran's civilization. They're just clowns. Now, I don't think that about Tulsi Gabbard. I find her to be intelligent, and I find her to be well-spoken. Now, whatever we saw before, either a play or she, for some reason, has been compromised or for whatever reason chose power, whatever you call whatever she has, it's certainly not power, over her honesty, integrity, and dedication to her principles, if that's what was happening before. Because, I mean, you can't say stand up for the truth and then continue to not speak up when all the truth is being hidden by the people you work for. You get the point. That's just a meaningless statement to go, oh, she says that, so that must be what they're doing. Dumb people fall for things like that. Well, the other show we just did on the 11th, the Fauci that got away. If you want to, we're going to make a point about Fauci really quickly, because that's over, guys. I mean, look, they're going to keep trying to make you think that something's going to come. I hope it does, regardless of what. I mean, I hope that person deserves to be in prison. But we passed the statute of limitations on that. Trump's Iran laws and accepting the hard truth that Israel controls U.S. policy. Very, very, very easy to see. Colonel Douglas McGregor tells you that Israel controls our military. Former CIA agent John Kirikow says it's not Russiagate. Israel controls this country. I mean, I can go down a list of people that are literally outright saying this at this point, and it shouldn't make you blindly believe it. But at some point you go, okay. I mean, this is either one grand lie that I could look into for myself and prove is wrong, or I'll look at and go, wow, these people actually have something they're pointing to. And my point is, either way, look, because you'll see for yourself. So the Fauci that got away. Now, Senator Rand Paul comes out and says on the 11th, tune in, whistleblower testimony. And I want to point out again, I'm glad it's being talked about, but why would you have done this? Now, I will point out, I don't know, maybe there's a reason he wasn't possibly able to get it done before the 11th, right? Before Fauci was basically skipped. But no, it ended up happening, I think it was yesterday. And so, whistleblower set to testify on Wednesday. Yes, it was today. So had that happened before, maybe Fauci would have gotten in trouble. Because right now, what are we hearing? Oh my God, the testimony, they called out Fauci. Well, gee, that almost seems like it's planned out to make sure that we know it was Fauci right after you're no longer allowed to hold him accountable. So then it all goes away, I guess. And also, there's no follow-up. There's no evidence. There's no I'm blanking on so many terms today. You know, where you introduce new evidence into the court. God, what's wrong with my mind today? Well, you know, there's no, in the process of a court case, you get to present evidence, right? Give me the word in the chat and I'll thank you. The point is that without with no actual charge because the statute of limitations is passed, well, there's no effort to actually, so if people go, well, Trump is involved, clearly, so is Biden. Well, too late. We don't get to see any more information because that's passed. That's planned, in my opinion. Nobody's going to give me that. That's right. I'm looking at the Rumble chat too. That's the problem. So I'm sure that's probably listed 17 times in the other one. Thank you for those that put it out there. Discovery. Thank you, Ghost Starch. You're on point today. It's important to think about, though. That's always what's interesting about these lawsuits and stuff is that sometimes it actually works against them because they use it to deflect, but then it opens the window to people to bring in evidence that exposes them, sometimes not even related to the allegation. That's important. So this arguably no longer is allowed to happen, at least through the if they say Fauci was guilty and Fauci then gets brought in front of court or gets arrested or, the process starts. Well, through that, it connects to everybody, guys. Fauci is just a player in all of this. I mean, he's high up, but realize that he was still working for people like Trump and Biden, or at least whoever we believe was controlling everything. Daily Wire comes out, of course, and says the carelessness of Anthony Fauci is in all the likelihood led to this pandemic that 15 million people died. Oh yeah, so we're still pushing the idea that COVID killed everybody. That's Daily Wire for you. Don't forget that. And Rand Paul seems to be on the same boat pretty much about the idea that this is a lab leak and the whole theory. As he says, those CIA scientists concluded that COVID came from a lab leak, except they lied to us about that if you think it's real the entire time until they way later decided to go, oh yeah, now we can talk about it. So even if that is the case, doesn't that feel wrong to everybody? That people like us were on the first month going, well, we should think about this in the biolabs in Fort Detrick. And they all shut us down. We actually got censored from platforms for that point. And then they allowed you to talk about it now. That makes me feel like none of that's actually reality. And you know my thoughts on it. We've gone over it before. Then someone scribbled out the conclusion at 2 a.m. and changed the report. That's it, though. Yeah, that's what we're charging them for. That's it, apparently. That they just said, nope, we disagree. We lied about where it came from. Not that they literally conducted gain-of-function research and worked on dangerous things that killed lots of people and then lied about jabs that killed even more. Not that, though. Just we'll call it fraud. Yeah, sort of like the rest of it. But never mind, because it's not actually going to happen because the statute of limitations is passed. Now, I'm not trying to be such a downer on this, guys, but realize if this is all just a bunch of talk like it always is, what's it for? So they can let you feel like you got some awareness. That's always what happens. We'll let you know what's happening as long as you can't do anything about it. Eric Dougherty, of course, does what he usually does and comes in and just goes, yay, everything's the greatest and we're winning. CIA whistleblower testifies Fauci was directly involved. Yeah, we all know that, man. Lab leak conclusions were withheld. Bombshell. Of course, the whole point is Fauci needs to face legal consequences. Oh, funny how you guys weren't screaming about that up until this point. Now, afterward, I think these people, whether bots or not, are just reverberations. They're just the thing. It doesn't even matter if 30 seconds ago they were saying something opposite. It's literally, I think, a feed machine. It's like a machine of, it's a network, I think, of people that just reiterate what is being stated. Now, this 5 times August says something rather honest, as he has been, or as he does, rather. My point is he's somebody who has called out Trump after supporting him until he challenged double-crossed everybody. He says it's important to acknowledge Fauci's freedom and escape from his murderous activities and crimes now rests entirely on Trump and co. Accountability. The time to act was a year ago. They did nothing. Now, that's important. Not on the 10th. But if it was there, which it was, it should have been done right then. Trump, and so same with Biden, by the way. Trump said nothing. Even RFK Jr., who wrote the book on Fauci, literally wrote a book about Fauci's criminality, which is scathing, sat silent. And so they let him get away. I mean, how else do you describe that? He says, some of you are going to argue, no, Biden pardoned Fauci. There's nothing you could have done. He says, BS. Well, I agree. First of all, what most Republicans are saying is that, well, that's not valid. I would agree with that. You know why? Because you can't just pardon somebody for future crimes. That's not how that works. As much as they all seem to do it today, Trump even called it out, but then weirdly did nothing to go after Fauci. And so what they did, in my opinion, was set up a construct to give them the excuse. So when it inevitably did not happen, the people that want to believe in Trump will go, well, he couldn't have, even though he literally said it didn't matter and he was. It's such a confounding thing we deal with today. And it says, and you cannot honestly believe that if you also believe an auto pen ran the country during Biden's term, which is a whole other crime Trump and co have done absolutely nothing about. Now, that really comes down to the fact of whether you can prove that he actually let somebody else or somebody else through him being senile and out of the picture to use it, which they can't. I'm almost willing to bet you anything that somebody else was doing it. Biden was very clearly struggling through senility or whatever you think it was. But the point is you need to be able to prove that it wasn't just Biden using the stamp, but somebody else. Because an auto pen is not the problem. Most Republicans still seem to think using one is the problem. Trump used them many times. Trump used it in this administration. In the past, it was already ruled by Supreme Court that you can. Now, you can disagree with that. In fact, I do. The point, though, is that it's still something they allow. It's about whether or not somebody else did, and they've never been able to prove that. And so they just used it to keep you guys spinning your wheels and never did anything. But yet James Woods will love to scream about how it's all going to come down, and they all seem to. But yet weirdly never actually go, why aren't you doing this, unless they're aiming at somebody on the way out, like Kash or Bondi, but never the team. Some of you are going to argue, no, he got the pardon. But it says, so accountability across the board, no matter what side you want to identify with, left or right or center, is nowhere to be found. If you ever had doubt before, understand now that they are all guilty of murder. He also adds, and this is the next day, so just about everybody MAGA wanted arrested for COVID crimes prior to January 20th, all the ones Alex Jones told you were absolutely going down if we could just keep Trump alive, is now either working with the government, again, or back on TV trying to scare you with another virus. Yep, same old, same old. Lastly, he adds today, or yesterday, I guess, still, allow me to fast forward you guys to 2029. Now, you could argue this is a black pill take. This is what, arguably, it's just, well, it depends. It's black pilled if you do say we're screwed and then there's nothing we can do. But if you say we're screwed, but I'm going to fight my hardest to stop it, that's still not black pilled. The idea is about giving up. It's about accepting your fate and going, we're absolutely screwed. There's nothing we can do. So you could argue that by saying this is inevitably what's going to happen, it's somewhat that direction. But I would argue that, at least what I've seen from his work, that he's going to keep calling it out. And I'm in the same boat. He says, allow me to fast forward you guys to 2029. Quote, the statute of limitations on Fauci may run out again, but we're working on something new, and the DOJ has until 2037 to act. Here's Rand Paul saying the statute of limitations on Fauci's gain-of-function lies may have run out, but he's not off the hook. White Coat Waste uncovered emails proving he lied to Congress in 2024 about using his personal Gmail for NIH business. Oh, now we're back to email lies. You see just lower and lower, right? This is, she jaywalked. It's like, get him. DOJ has until 2029 to act. The clock is still started. Yeah, I mean, good. If you got a crime and you could prove it, go after him. But isn't this insulting when it comes down to what we know this person, crimes against humanity that were actually committed? And it's not just Fauci, it's everybody else involved too. It's people in Congress that allowed this to happen, that ignored it. They never did anything about it. Same thing with the Iran war. But that's impossible to actually, litigate. At this point, we know that these people in the administrations, Trump and Biden, were involved. And now it's basically, oh, well, he lied in his emails. So we'll go after him that way. And hey, maybe something will even happen. And how much you want to bet? It's like a slap on the wrist and some embarrassment. I'd find that to be designed. So we'll follow up. Whether Ghislaine Maxwell gets pardoned, which seems to be coming, whether Fauci never gets charged, whether James Comey and Letitia James and all the rest of them inevitably don't get charged with, or John Bolton. I hope all of them go to prison. I doubt it will happen. And in the meantime, you get all the same people. And I think it's because I was looking at it recently, but for some reason, Laura Logan's posts just keep popping up in my thread. And it's like every day, Obama, treason, it's all coming down, and posting that same clip we just showed you of Voorhees from 2024. I just wonder why journalists would end up continually doing that and not going, why haven't you done this since 2024? Which would be the logical thing to do, as opposed to going, it's happening, when nothing's happening. As far as I can tell, there's no momentum at all on Obama. There's statements, there's arguments, there's tangential investigatory actions that aren't really defined. I was looking into it today, but there is nothing that seems to be actual momentum on Obama of all the things we're looking at. So bringing this back, and I would even argue to transition this into the part that I want to really talk about today, that this ultimately would be one of the many things that might make it all make sense. Because in my mind, if we're talking about what I believe is the reality of just the U.S. government being a uniparty at the end of the day, that Obama and Biden and Bush and Trump represent the same thing, represent the same interests. But you see what they've recognized, they need to keep us thinking like things are different, right? Like we've had a revolution every 4 years, right? Now we get to start anew, and it doesn't really start anew though, but we have to start anew. We have to we got to get people moving again and aim at different people and do all that. But the agenda didn't even slow down. In fact, it speeds up on the in-between because nobody's paying attention. And so the reality to me is that this has been an ongoing continuation, whether they even know that or not. And so Obama was involved with these types of actions when regime changes, the ISIS elements, the Middle East conversation. These things are all interconnected in many different ways. So today, again, we're going to focus on Honduras. And I mean, if this unfortunately continues to expand, and will unfortunately be focusing on other places. And I believe that's where this is aimed. When I saw this, and it's just not a surprise. HondurasGate, leaked recordings, and it's all documented. They're all outlined on this platform. I'll show you in a second. Leaked recordings reveal a sweeping Israeli operation to destabilize democracy in Latin America with the help of Trump, Milei, Bukele, and more. And I simply said, gee, what a shock. Prospera, regime change, hashtag two-party illusion. We'll go through some of the other articles that we've talked about, but let's start with, actually, I'll include this as well. We just had a recent Solutions Watch, or rather, it was an IMA panel, but James Solutions Watch, if you watch his platform as well, which I hope you do, he does a focus on solutions, and we did an IMA panel where we kind of did it together as a panel for his Solutions Watch. I think he said we're going to continue to do it. I think that would be great. In this, we got into a brief conversation about, from an anarchistic libertarian perspective, about how network states and Prospera specifically plays into it. It's worth watching. And I think the whole thing is worth watching. The point, though, is that in this, the argument, first of all, for me is made, and you can easily prove this, and if you watch the show, you know that in Prospera in particular, it was started with an illegal regime change. To me, that matters more than almost anything, because the ends do not justify the means. But beyond that, it gets into sort of like, is this libertarian? Right? I mean, and what I really want people to think about is that as this continues, the larger view, what I'm seeing in everything, and I know you guys see it, is that it's sort of a bait and switch for everything today, right? And the Fed, which they're not even like pretending they're doing that, by the way, but that was like the yelled narrative, and then CBDC, which they are doing, or IRS, which again, they don't seem to be ending, but it's kind of, but the narrative was there. But a lot of the other ones, right, are sort of getting you in the momentum of what they say they want, and then bait and switch. And so in this case, I argue this is about trying to sell us on, people like me, in fact, on the idea that, look, here's a place where there's no government. Here's a place where it's, as in this platform, he would call it government as a service, which it sounds great. And I argue in this that if you look into these locations, even the ones that I'm mostly concerned about, you'll find people that are trying to do what they believe is right within that situation. Libertarians that want to start their own location and do it. It's a multifaceted thing. So my worry is not about every single part that's happening, but rather where the whole thing is leading, and whether it goes in this direction, whether your little libertarian bastion is even going to be allowed to exist or matter once this goes to full fruition. And I think that's the point. And I think what it comes down to is that that's on a whim at that point. As Ian Davis, I'll point to our interview in a second, in his book, The Technocratic Dark State, makes a very, very good argument and outlines exactly what they're telling you. Specifically, in this case, I believe it was Srinivasan who wrote the book around the network state discussion. He's former CTO of Coinbase, who made the argument that everything goes digital. Calls it tech Zionism. That's what they call it. And of course, the interesting point is that overlaps with this idea of where you own nothing and you've never been happier, at least from the Great Reset point. And this idea makes you feel like you own these things, but you don't. You own access to them. And that's written down in their conversations. It is a bait and switch. It is the Great Reset, in my opinion. So what I want to highlight on this is the Honduras element of this, to give you kind of a spotlight on what I believe is happening right now all over the world, at least trying to happen. So this, as I said before, they entitled it HondurasGate. This is one of their investigations inside what they call the Reactionary International's Latin American operation. Now, I will point out, by the way, that this, I believe, and it's just my interpretation of some of the other stuff, that they have a political view in all this, which I think is everywhere. I don't think people even, I think it's very hard for people to not have a political perspective today. It doesn't make it necessarily bad or wrong, or that you should ignore it, even if they're like a hard left or hard right opinion. It's still about the facts and content. But the reason I'm saying that is because if that matters to you, well, then it should be included. Whether or not they might be blinded to certain things, and if that does matter. Like, for example, what they believe. Well, at the end of the day, go through their work, look for yourself. My point is, I think they do very meticulous work, it looks like, and outline what they see as a transition of power through illegal means. And what they've already highlighted in the past are previous examples. Inside the Reactionary International's Latin American operation, on the morning of April 30th, 2026, so this starts in the recent administration, obviously, the investigation platform HondurasGate, operating from Switzerland in collaboration with Canal Red, the Spanish television outlet, and its written platform, Dario Red, released the first in a series of 37 audio recordings extracted, which are here for you to check out, extracted from WhatsApp, Signal, and Telegram exchanges between some of the most powerful political figures in the Western Hemisphere. By the time the final files were released on May 6th. They appeared to expose a transnational conspiracy of staggering scope. And so you see, we're going to get into the point of Honduras alone, but what this highlights is something that goes way beyond Honduras. I just want to note the time real quick. And I think that's what's important is we're talking about something that goes international. At least in its aim, I guess. Because who's to say whether they succeed in other locations? But that's why I don't want this to be seen as sort of like a one-off, oh, we don't care about Honduras. That's not this has global implications, in my opinion. By the time, make sure I missed that. Yeah, by the time the final files were released by May 6th, they appeared to expose a transnational conspiracy of staggering scope, a coordinated effort allegedly financed by multiple governments to influence the Honduran election, the most recent one. Return a convicted drug trafficker to political power through the purchase of U.S. presidential pardon, and transform the Central American country into a strategic U.S.-Israeli asset. Now, what's crazy right now is at one point that would have been immediately pushed back on by everybody. Like, it's just, you can't say that, you're racist or something, because of all the weirdness around this conversation forever. But right now, as we all know, that's something that I feel more people than I've ever seen in my life are like not only going, oh, I can consider that, but are going, oh, that makes sense. Right? That what we're seeing is this U.S.-Israeli collaboration of manipulation around the world. Or, and of course, I would argue that one is influencing the other, but that's for you to decide. And it says, then through diverted Honduran public funds that should have gone to the Honduran people, or rather be used for their purposes, extend the same operation across the region, targeting the progressive governments of Latin America. Now, I urge you not to, the whole progressive left-right thing is different. Like, there's clear elements of overlap around the world, but I've always said this, it's not the same left-right party perspective everywhere else in the world, right? There's more of a, like, the classical meaning of the progressive or conservative. It changes where you go. I mean, in this country, it has changed over the years and flip-flopped in many ways. And of course, I hope we can realize that it really means nothing at the end of the day for what they ultimately do. But what my point in saying that is you can view that as more adversarial government, I would argue. Not necessarily just because of the politics, but really because of the control factor. But of course, you decide for yourself and what you think is the most important. All of it planned and agreed in explicit terms in the voices of the conspirators themselves. Despite claims by despite claims by figures supportive of the Honduran government that the recordings are AI generated, which is what they've argued, the audios were subjected to rigorous forensic authentication using the Phoenixia Voice Inspector program before publishing these. A 9-step protocol producing SHA-256 hashes, acoustic biometric indicators, and an AI synthesis probability verdict for each file, with the full technical dossier made publicly available. Each, according to the platform's methodology, any file below a 10% AI synthesis probability and above an 80% confidence threshold was classified as authentic human speech, a standard designed to neutralize voice cloning, deep fakes, and hybrid synthetic audio. The chain of custody is transparent. Every file is downloadable and independently verifiable. So I definitely thought that was important to relay. So this is not just some, well, we've got words on audio that, today especially, we should be questioning everything. And I mean, we're at a point now where we must know that things that are that you cannot tell the difference. They're able to make fake things that you just simply cannot tell. So just got to bear that in mind today. That's the unfortunate reality of where we are and what they've done. So in this case, though, they went to extreme lengths to verify that these things were in fact authentic. The recordings offer a rare look into how the Reactionary International operates. That's just the term for what they call not just what's focused on Honduras, not just the U.S. and Israel, but rather this, what they say, this reactionary international force to try to, insert its will on other countries around the world for, I think, obvious reasons we can see playing out in the world stage right now. And it goes on to say, the recordings offer the rare look on how they operate across borders and serve as a near perfect case study in how it actually operates. It's financing, it's media infrastructure, it's electoral manipulation, and it's geopolitical logic. This is a Honduran story only in the sense that Honduras is where the threads of this network were most publicly exposed and were now Following the electoral coup of 2025 conducted by the Trump administration, its people suffer its most punishing consequences. Pull any one of those threads and you will find yourself digging into a network that runs through Washington, Buenos Aires, and Tel Aviv. Now, see, my point in all of this is, and I urge you to go through this and listen to the recordings, look at the source material, and I'll go through my work and you can listen to the breakdown of before if you want to, and I think you should. My mind is that there's no, I mean, I understand the argument for how this could be, at least create an opening in some sense for where you may be able to, at least right now, see your view into fruition. But I just don't understand how, somebody, whatever, you're an anarchist, you're a libertarian, and feel that this created through state-backed violence would in any way represent those ideals. I don't agree with that. And I think this is not a debatable point. This is what happened in regard to the 2009 coup that was, when we'll get it writes this in this article. I've covered this extensively. I'll go through other articles as well. The source material is very easy to prove. Or rather, the source material you can look for yourself, but it's very easy to prove. And this was an effort to put people in power that would get them what they wanted. Now, you could argue that in 2009, that the design might have been different. Maybe this wasn't about what Israel wanted or network state. The point, though, is that that's what very quickly happened following that regime change. And putting pardoning him and putting people in place that they want, this seems to be right back on track. And I mean, see, these are the moments that I wish we could capture. Like, I wish I would have had the note for when this was, but I mean, you remember, what did I say about this? What did I say before the last 2025 election? I said, I think they're trying to initiate another regime change. The current president in Honduras a year ago said, Trump's administration is trying to remove me from power. And says, okay, well, let's look at that. And then it started to develop. And we said, look here, they're trying to do it again because they want to initiate the network state agenda. That's what I read it as. There could be more agendas at play. And the current government was trying to stop the ZD, the special development zone. They were suing them. They were trying to stay. And of course, then they put this person back in place and bing, bang, boom, it's all back in play. It's literally exactly what I said was going to happen. Now, that's not every time, all the time, but in this case, that was the reality. And I think that's worth thinking about. 20 years ago, talking about where this would end up. And as always, there are people out there that were doing this long before I was talking about it. The recordings reveal the alleged plot and the series of secret agreements involving Honduran President Nasri Asfura, former President Juan Orlando Hernandez, convicted of drug trafficking and sentenced to 45 years in a U.S. federal court before being pardoned by Donald Trump in December 2025. I mean, I laughed about it then. You think about the absurdity of pardoning somebody like that who's been proven to be a drug trafficker while you claim you're murdering people in the ocean with no trial because they're trafficking drugs? You can't even make that up. That's the stupidest thing in the world. Argentine President Javier Milei and the U.S. and Israeli governments, among others, are the ones involved with this operation. The recordings also implicate Honduran Vice President Maria Antonieta Mejia, National Congress President Tomas Zambrano, Electoral Counselor Cosetti Lopez Osorio, I could be mispronouncing some of these, and Jorge Calix, a former member of the Progressive Libre Party, which I think is important. And this is one of the points they make in this, like I'm always pointing out, as well as if we were going to talk about Iran today, which we won't, we'll get into it tomorrow, there's Democrats which effectively are allowing Trump to continue what's happening. Like in the sense that they're the main elements that are allowing this to continue. And that's the right, left, it's an illusion, guys. And it shows you that ultimately it comes down to war, Israel, and a few other things that they're always aligned on. And it says, and now a congressional deputy, and as the audio suggests, a key operator of the right wing inside the Honduran Congress. Calix's presence in the recordings is among the most troubling details in the full dossier. It points to the penetration of the Reactionary International's network not only into the governing right, but into figures who crossed over from the left. Same thing we see in Israel in this country, guys, raising serious questions about the depth of the operation's reach inside Honduran's institutions, which also shows you it's not about an ideological political push. It's about using your politics to gain control of the country. The conversations are remarkable for their candor. In one of the most revealing audios, dated January 30th, 2026, former President Hernandez instructs Asfura from the United States, I need you to send about $150,000 to Rosales' account. We are going to set up an office to create a digital journalism unit. This is a direct quote. This will be managed by someone from the President of the United States team. Excuse me. They're going to set up a news site where important data about Manuel Zelaya and Xiomara Castro will be released. Counterintelligence, and this is this, and the point to understand here, this is, think about this in what Trump and Biden talk about. This is illegal, obviously. You're conducting an internal operation from within the country to manipulate the election. Think about what they cry about in this country all the time. And rightly so, if it's happening, right, which I think we can prove within it, left and right are doing it all the time, but ultimately I don't think at the level that we're talking about. What explains that is I don't think half these people in Congress are even in the know about what's really going on. I've said that for years. I think that these are just talking heads that are used. In some cases, that was why you would explain why they think that they're vying for their own personal agendas, in my view anyway. The point overall is that this is being operated from the United States like they did with the Kurds in Iran and everywhere else. It's just understand this is what they do, and that's a crime. They're not telling you this is the way it went down because they don't want you to know this is the way it went down. They want you to think they're fighting for freedom and supporting a revolution for regime change, or rather for, freedom. Asfora responds by offering additional transfers from a friend's account, drawing on resources from Honduras' Secretaría de Infraestructura y Obras Públicas. Public money diverted to a foreign disinformation operation run out of the United States. In other words, Honduran infrastructure funds redirected to a propaganda unit serving Trump's political agenda, like everywhere else. In another exchange, Hernandez instructed Congressional President Zambrano, apparently at Washington's behest, not to hesitate in applying, quote, any kind of violence. In Honduras, quote, we need strength, we need logistics, we need blood. If you want to keep people controlled, you need to oppress them, squeeze them. Counter violence by generating violence. It's what President Trump says. Now, who knows if President Trump says that? This is what he was saying he was told from Trump. He also invoked infamous Colombian drug lord Pablo Escobar. The exchange portrays Hernandez, recently pardoned after his U.S. conviction, discussing the consolidation of his political control in Honduras with senior government officials. Quote, in Honduras, we need strength, we need logistics, we need blood. I think that's really important to think about. Because what do we see? Now, you could argue that's not what they do, but what do you see in every single U.S. agenda like this? You see violence. You see that, look at what they did in Iran, literally flooding them with weapons and foreign assets to create violence. And if you still pretend like that was organic, you can literally prove right now it's not. You can prove it like we proved at the beginning. And so the point overall is that this is something you can clearly see as a regular tactic. Syria, Venezuela. Do we really go down the list? I know a lot of people still just don't know these things, but in Venezuela, they were caught putting in a humanitarian food truck full of wood and barbed wire. And then Guaido's people were literally caught on film trying to hit it with Molotov cocktails to blame on the other side. And then they go, oh, they're starving them. That's what they do. Or Israel publicly starving everybody in Gaza to this very point. Doctors Without Borders just put out another post saying they're still starving everybody. They're still blocking aid, which would be a violation of the ceasefire if it even existed, or bombing people in Lebanon. What is it? Was it said 4 children a day or something like that, or an hour? It's horrifying, guys. Anyway, point is, they're doing the same thing there, or they were, and they still are. In a January 20 voice note, Hernandez said that, quote, the Prime Minister of Israel is going to support us. And in a March 14th message, he credited the financing of his pardon to, quote, a group of rabbis and from people who supported Israel. And in yet another exchange, Hernandez told Zambrano directly, quote, I sent you the people of Israel. They sent you money. I'm the one doing the lobbying. Quote, and then it says here, HernandezGate makes its most stunning revelation, one that has yet to be covered by major newsrooms in the country where these transactions took place. Donald Trump sold a presidential pardon. A man convicted of importing tons of cocaine into the United States walked free, not because justice was reconsidered, but because a foreign government paid for his release. The pardon, one of the most powerful instruments of executive power in the American constitutional system, was, according to these recordings, a transaction. I mean, is that even difficult for you to wrap your mind around? He was selling access to his security briefings. I mean, it's pretty clear. This is exactly who he is. In one exchange, Hernandez and Malay, from Argentina, agreed to additional $350,000 for destabilizing operations. This is state money extracted from Honduras Social Security, amplified by Argentina and Israel, redirected towards political operations targeting sovereign democratic governments elsewhere in the region. please think about this in every other conversation we're here. Like, at least consider the idea of stealing money from the people you claim you're trying to save and then using that money to destabilize those people. That's evil. Like I'm always talking about, the ones that pretend to be the hero while they're in fact doing the worst thing you can see. The so-called digital journalism unit they reference was designed to operate from the United States to avoid detection. Gee, doesn't that sort of sound like Operation Aerodynamic and setting up the former Nazi element, Mykola Lebed, in the United States under the Prologue Inc. news operation, which is literally what happened? Yes, it's what they do. For those who don't know that, I'll include the show for you. And it's called Not Just Azov. The CIA has been funding fascism, has been cultivating fascism in Ukraine since at least 1948. And here's the actual document in case you want to look further, because it's important to understand that this is not new. Directly from the CIA. Read through it. The guy's name? Mykola Lebed. They appointed him as the president of Prologue. The guy was a literal Nazi war criminal. The U.S. government got him from Poland, set him up in Ukraine and the United States, and let him run a media operation as a Nazi. If you actually understand the history, it shouldn't be that surprising. Operation Paperclip, this is what they do. It's reality. It's what they are. I'm not talking about the word Nazi. You can decide whatever you think these things mean. They're bad people, guys. They're worked. I mean, this is, I digress. You get into the point of Dr. Ishii in Japan, World War II, and the Nazis. This government absorbed the worst parts of what they claim they were fighting. Seems they do that every time. But you can look at this for yourself. My point in saying all of this is to understand who these people are, right? So here, we're talking about the same thing, where the Trump administration set up a digital journalism unit. So think about what they call that everywhere in the world, their media operations. And that was literally a destabilizing government propaganda unit being led by the person they set it up with. Like we're talking about people that are violent manipulators. And it goes on to say, preparing files against the government of Mexico, Colombia, Honduras, outgoing leftist administrations. This is a condensed example of how transnational right-wing media ecosystems increasingly operate. Now, you can make it right-wing if you want. I think the left wing is the same exact thing. These are elements, and really, at the end of the day, the thing we're talking about, I don't think cares about one or the other. I think it's about the control at the end of the day. And so, left, right, Great Reset, Freedom Cities, I think we're talking about the same thing. And it says a nominally independent news operation staffed by operatives linked to the Trump administration, funded by diverted public money, designed to produce political ammunition disguised as journalism. The communications team was reportedly planning to launch a coordinated media offensive against the governments of Colombia and Mexico. And here we are. We're watching these things happen to a degree right now. The recordings go beyond political operations into comprehensive plan to physically reconstruct Honduras as a U.S.-Israeli strategic asset. Territorial reconversion. That's what the subtitle is. So this is what I'm talking about, guys. This is the idea of the transition of the way things operate. And so what she's saying, or the platform is saying, is that we're talking about restructuring the entire state, or rather country, as a strategic asset, an outpost to, from there, further conduct these operations. The agreements include the expansion of employment and economic development zones, the ZEDs. They literally talk about this. Special economic zones that effectively cede national sovereignty to foreign legal systems. The construction of a new military base on the island of Roatan. They're talking about Prospera, a center for the confinement of terrorism in Tegus. I'm going to hack that one. Tegucigalpa, modeled by El Salvador CCOT, and the transoceanic train project awarded to General Electric. So the Roatan, that is one of the locations that they're literally talking about. That's under the umbrella of the whole Prospera thing. And so what we're discussing here is exactly that transition. And this platform is telling you, take it for what you will. I believe they're correct, that this is about setting up kind of a starting point to initiate this throughout the South America. The ZD model, or ZED model, which the leftist Castro government had begun to dismantle as a violation of Honduran sovereignty. Now, take it because left, right, you can make it about that, and maybe it is. Either way, my thought, whether left or right, is this is an element of the government that was put in, here's the way I look at it. 2009 was an illegal coup, right? The will of the people essentially was not seen to fruition. if you think that's ever what's happening. And ultimately, then I think the U.S. government and Israel, which we can see right now, got spread really thin between then and now. And I think over the last probably 5 years, they've lost the ability, or they just decided not to engage in regard to controlling that location. And then we saw in 2025, Trump put them back in place. So you can make that about left-right. I just see it as an element of somebody who recognized they can gain power because they did what the people were asking for. And maybe that's because they want power and not because they care about the people. But however you look at it, that's what I see it as. And they stood up and said what I agree with. That's illegal. That's a violation of our Supreme Court. It's a violation of our laws. It's a violation of our sovereignty. And people wanted that to go away. The base at Roatan would join Palmarola as a second major U.S. military installation on Honduran soil. In the recordings, Honduran sovereignty is treated as subordinate to broader geopolitical and economic objectives, quite obviously. Electoral and judicial manipulation. The recordings suggest Asfoura's victory was viewed internally as part of a longer-term political project tied to U.S. and Israeli regional interests. Asfoura wins the seat and prepares the ground for Juan Orlando Hernandez to stand again in the next electoral cycle, even though he's a criminal and shouldn't be allowed to in the context of their selection process. These recordings, it's translated, I believe, recordings reveal that Trump's moves were part of a plan to return the former president to power. Voice messages from Asfoura following private meetings at Mar-a-Lago make the coordination explicit. This is electoral interference with the explicit goal of changing Honduras' geopolitical alignment. Now, what's funny is that shouldn't even be, it's in the EN part of it, so it's in English. So there's a little bit of a translation thing between some of the words. But that doesn't even seem that shocking today, even though it should, because they Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan is what they do. But people have just almost like kind of unconsciously become used to it. So we should care about this, though, that you're just going, we're going to take over that country for our own purposes. We don't care what people think, and then frame it as somehow what, the people's will. And then, of course, allow some kind of technocratic dystopia to take over the country. That pardon deserves particular scrutiny. It arrived in Hernandez. It arrives 2 days before Election Day, functioning as an electoral intervention in its own right, signaling to Honduran voters the depth of Trump's investment in his victory. But the recording suggests its significance goes even further. Hernandez had been promised release. Israel had financed the lobbying. Hernandez had been promised release. I already read that. Israel financed the lobbying. Roger Stone, who I read in our, I think the show before last on Prospera, we went into Roger Stone's statements about this. Roger Stone organized the access, and Trump has signed the document. Each actor in this chain received something in return. The question of whether Trump has been selling pardons is no longer speculative. HondurasGate provides the receipts. Now, in regard to Roger Stone, as I think they mentioned here as well, he's the one, it was clear before, on paper clear or statements, but he's the one that made the point that these things interconnect. Said this is freedom cities. That's what we want Trump to do here. He made it very clear, and I think it was a little bit too clear. I don't think he was supposed to make that point so clear. That's just my opinion. Because everywhere else, they do their best to sort of decouple those things. And then you could find the pronomos capital connection between the funding of both sides of it. No matter how much, the amount being, the amount within that funding mechanism matters, right? But the only point being made there is that there is funding, and it is coming through the people we're talking about. That's not debatable. It's not. So my point, as always, is that you have the connection through what their agenda is. Now, if we understand, as Ian makes very clear in his book, if you understand the way these things operate today, they know we're paying attention. So that's the way Elon Musk operates as well. We saw that a really very clear element when he was in the administration, or still is that you ultimately see that they now take very, very great pains to make sure that they're sort of disconnected from what they're actually doing. Think about that when it comes down to whether or not these people are connected, when you can literally see, they're out there promoting it. It's on anyway, the pronomos capital element of it has Prospera as like one of their leading investments, even though the amount is smaller than you may think is enough to make it controlling a factor, right? But my point is that you can see this agenda. If you want to make it about Peter Thiel personally, because he's invested, he's the pronomos capital element, or Mark Andreessen, you can. To me, that's one part of a much larger alarming story, right? And so it's about what they're actually trying to accomplish through this. But obviously it does matter, right? Just taking Israel, for example. Israel is committing a genocide in front of the world. Israel is publicly doing things that the whole world is, that alone matters if they're involved in an agenda. Peter Thiel and Palantir are one of the most alarming things happening in the world right now, in my opinion. And that's steadily becoming aware. We'll make a point about it in a second to everybody. So if he's involved to whatever degree, it matters. But the real picture, if you understand this and, look at the shows we've gone through, it's obvious that these people are invested in this agenda. Peter Thiel goes and speaks about these different seasteading and they believe in this, guys. Now, the most significant revelation in the HondurasGate recordings, the one with the most profound implications for understanding the reactionary international's global architecture, is the centrality of Israel, the Israeli state involvement, in their opinion. But I agree. I think that plays a huge factor in this. The audio files document a deliberate regional strategy, corroborated by an extraordinary sequence of public events that preceded the accompanied the leak. The forensic analysis confirmed that in the initial recording, Hernandez mentions that his pardon was financed by Benjamin Netanyahu and involved lobbying from Republicans, with prominent Trump political advisor Roger Stone supposedly responsible for organizing the key meetings. Now, he claimed that in his own Substack posts. According to the leaked conversations, Hernandez's return to Honduras and all the logistics of reinstalling him in the presidency would be financed by Israel. If successful, Hernandez would become Trump's main political operator and Israeli advocate in the region, turning Honduras into a strategic area of military, logistical, and economic operations for the United States. Before even being inaugurated, Asfoura made Israel his first foreign destination. Certainly sounds familiar today, doesn't it? Meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Herzog. The trip coincided with a visit by Lindsey Graham. What a coincidence. Who separately met with the president of Israel as well. Asfoura then traveled directly to Washington for meetings with Marco Rubio and, of course, Howard Lutnick, right? and other senior Trump officials. Nothing weird about all that. I think that was generally it. Now, I urge you to go through all of this stuff, the recordings, the source material, everything. Genuinely, I don't even think you need this stuff to be able to understand what's really happening. To me, this just makes it undeniably clear that this is a coordinated transition of power, or really a coordinated transition of society. And that really concerns me. So here is another article from Gil Duran. And I've referenced one of his other articles before. He's been writing about this for a while. I believe it was the Prospera show we did. But I want to add to this from something he wrote December 4th, 2025, back when he was actually pardoned, Hernandez. Trump pardons drug trafficker who backed Network State City. On Tuesday, Donald Trump pardoned a convicted drug trafficker who happens to be the former president of Honduras. There's a Network State angle. He says Juan Orlando Hernandez, who was convicted of conspiring to smuggle over 400 tons of cocaine into the U.S., is the right-wing politician who supported the creation of Prospera. Now, you know all this if you watch my previous work, but if you haven't, this is where it really does become even more clear. But this is just his outline of this. There is source material. Go through it. But on the show we did about this, I mean, it's painstakingly going through and, source material is the important part. But so the point is, Hernandez himself was the reason, the person involved with the creation of Prospera before his current or 2025, 2026 pardon from Donald Trump. And of course, on the island of Roatan, as I was telling you. Hernandez, who serves 2 terms as president of Honduras, championed special economic zones where investors could set their own tax, labor, regulatory rules, and long-term guarantees. The Wall Street Journal reported that he courted Silicon Valley investors by offering semi-autonomous charter city zones on the country's Caribbean coast. Now, this is from 2025, the Wall Street Journal article. You can read it, the link's right there. So my point, though, is to make sure you think about this in the context of before. The 2009 coup, the reality of putting him in place, and then what he began to do. You really can't miss the path here. After Hernandez left office, his successor started rolling back his illegal reforms, including the special economic zones that he had championed. And in between this, there's a long period of time, and which resulted in the creation of Prospera, a libertarian, they call it, it's not, startup backed by Silicon Valley investors, including Peter Thiel and Mark Andreessen, which is true. So the creation, as this applies to some degree, was only even possible because of the illegal regime change. And then once they put him in place, they still had issues with the Supreme Court. So what they do, they remove people from the court. to make sure they got who they just like El Salvador. No big deal there, right? It's all freedom if they get what you want, right? And that's what Trump says, and justify the means. So they manipulated the Supreme Court. And then what do you know? Boom, they got the vote they wanted. And they allowed that. People in the country did not like that. And then, of course, somebody else got put in power that you could argue was what people voted for. I'm very skeptical of that, just in general, always. But then the point is, she then tried to stop the thing that I think was very clearly not popular with Hondurans. And so she pushed back and she rescinded their allowance. And then what did they do? Sued them. How do you even make that make sense? You're talking about something that was done illegally. And then, okay, let's just even fine. Say you have the allowance, but then their new administration comes into power, and the Constitution, since they actually upheld it, says what you're doing is illegal, and they try to remove you. And so they sue them. And last I checked, I don't think it's actually resolved yet, but it was for about 2/3. I think it was 2/3 or it's 2/3, 3/4, I forget, a huge portion of their entire GDP. And so my argument back then was, if they won this lawsuit, that would essentially end up where this company, the Prospera, and these people backing it, the technocratic regime change elements, would basically gain control of all the assets of Honduras. But the government would technically still exist, but they would just be a body that stands there, seeing as how they would own everything and control everything. It's like a financial coup in its own right on top of everything. But overall, the point was that they were doing that all based on the idea that they just got to take that because they can. And it says, after Castro, Hernandez's successor, came into office and rolled back the ZD framework, its developers hired Washington lobbyists, of course, to pursue an $11 billion arbitration claim against Honduras, amounting to, there it is, roughly 2/3 of the country's annual budget. 2/3. So you're illegally doing this, but you want to sue them for what? To gain back control of something that you stole? Like, what this shows you is this is how broken the entire system, the global dynamic is. If you can have, like, these are like technocratic pirates, guys, literally just doing what they want, being told, then getting caught for doing it, being called out, and then they sue through Washington, which totally makes that clear who's involved in this agenda. Now, the Wall Street Journal story reveals that Trump goon Roger Stone explicitly argued pardoning Hernandez could, quote, crush socialism and save freedom in Honduras. How much you want to bet that's all Trump needed to hear? You could argue, just like everything else, he may not even know what's going on in Honduras. He just heard that and was like, yeah, Democrats are bad. Do that, what Roger said. Whatever the last person said into his ear. Calling Prospera a project with major implications, Roger Stone did, for U.S. policy and the future of freedom throughout the world. He literally called these freedom cities. Prospera is a flagship project of the network state cult. It is, which seeks to create billionaire-funded cities around the globe in preparation for an alleged collapse of nation states in the 21st century. Now, you could argue that's where it's going. I agree. I think people are becoming aware of the broken nature of government in itself. But whether or not, I would argue this is being driven into reality. The engineered collapse. Oh, by the way, I just got a response from James Corbett. Coming up next week, we're going to interview James about, kind of a lot of different points. His BRICS multipolarity discussion, but how it intertwines with the idea of the engineered collapse of the West that he's been talking about for a decade. And now we're watching it happen, I think. Very interesting. And so the point here is that nation state collapse is what they're making happen. I argue, to a degree, even if it was naturally on decline anyway, which is what usually makes that make sense for them. The, problem, reaction, solution of the situation. This fact is never mentioned by the Wall Street Journal, of course, in keeping with the mainstream media's general allergy to acknowledging the existence of the network state. Doesn't that in and of itself make you go, Now, it's not always absolute when they don't say something, it means something. But for this long, when you have an article here, an article there, but nothing real, like this is a huge thing happening. I just think for them not to talk about it, it says a lot. I was trying to think of what somebody just said about this, like talking about what's going on in the world without mentioning the network state dynamic is like talking about 9/11 without involving Al-Qaeda or something like that. Somebody just made that point. And I'm like, I agree. And it's weird how so many people push back on this, like it's somehow not real or hyperbolic. It's like every part of it is publicly being discussed and they're openly showing you that. It's the same point. Anybody that's talking about what's going on in the world without talking about Zionism is bad at their job or being willfully blind. It is a central factor in what's happening today. Or, same point, Anybody talking about technocracy and what we're watching build out through this technocratic change and not involving Israel and Zionism are either bad at their job or being willfully dishonest about it. Plenty of them are out there, guys. Now it says, Prospera, the flagship project, seeks to create these cities. It says that this fact is never mentioned, of course, because I think, as I read already, they're allergy to talking about it. But it says, but Roger Stone's decision to refer to Prospera as a freedom city is interesting, since Trump has announced plans to build 10 so-called freedom cities on federal land in the United States. This confirms that Trump's call for corporate-run fascist cities is connected to the network state cult. Now, at least in the minds of people behind it, whether Trump is aware of that or not is not for you to decide. The point, though, is that Roger Stone and the rest of these, I argue a lot of these people are very easily manipulating what Trump does every day, because it's easy to manipulate somebody full of hubris, narcissistic, if you know how to. Now it says, Prospera as an example of the tech right concept of a network state, a phrase coined by Silicon Valley venture capitalist Balaji Srinivasan, former CTO of Coinbase. He goes, the article from Kira Butler, I wrote about it earlier this year. And that's what she wrote. In a 2021 essay on his website, Srinivasan laid out his vision for people seeking to build a new utopia, or as he put it, a fresh start. Sure, there were conventional ways to do this, forming a new country through revolution or war, but that would be really hard, he writes, not to mention unpredictable. A cruise ship or somewhere in space were appealing options, but both presented logistical challenges. Far simpler and more practical was tech Zionism. Creating an online nation, complete with its own culture, economy, tax structure, and of course, startup-friendly laws. Now, phase out the billionaires. It says, trying to talk about what's happening in U.S. policy today without, that's just funny. I didn't think that's, I just basically quoted as ahead of it. For some reason, I thought it was a tweet that I read earlier. I guess I just forgot. Now, this is the same article, for those in the podcast, from Gil Duran. Give him credit for this. It's a good kind of analogy. Trying to talk about what's happening in the U.S. politics today without talking about the network state cult is like trying to explain 9/11 without mentioning Al-Qaeda. Or more aptly, the Israel and the U.S. government who control it. But either way, there's a video as well if you want to watch. But I think it's well done. He's calling this out back in 2025 December, guys. Now, here's his account, by the way, suspended on Twitter. That shouldn't be surprising at all. Typical where we are today. Now, here's the show we did in 2024, September, on Prospera. When I first found this, I thought this was, I still think it's incredibly alarming, but I thought this was the only example, but it turns out there was more the more you dug into it. More, Praxia and seasteading and all these different examples, and they all stem back to the same people and the same agenda. The technocratic regime change under the guise of freedom, technocrats are slowly taking control. I still stand by that to a degree. Anyway, this one was the larger one from 2025 in December, the network state coup and the engineered transition to tech Zionism. And I had a great interview with Ian Davis. I really hope you'll watch. And we get into all of this, and he agrees and outlines it in much depth. The technocratic dark state and the network state agenda. And of course, the show we did in 2025 as well around the funding part of this, at least from the side of Thiel, Andreessen, and their funding mechanism, which is tied to a lot of these things. Pronomos capital and the rapid transition to a techno-feudal state. Don't take my word for it. Can definitely consider if I'm missing something or wrong, but just look. That's all I ask. Look into it for yourself. Now, I want to get into this as it connects to artificial intelligence, the data centers, to kind of finish up today, and where this is going within this country, right? As two separate things, right? But the obvious overlap is there, and you can see it for yourself. So Jason Bassler's been doing great work as always, and he comes out and highlights this article from Wired. If you're still repeating the lie that we need to win the AI arms race against China, which is more accurately a data collection race, you need to stop it right now. You're laying the bricks of your own surveillance prison. And True Street Media adds to that, and this is something that Jason's been really trying to highlight and point to that people aren't really getting, I think, that the argument is China is the race. We have to beat China for AI. And that is arguably about data centers, is what at least they tell us. But when you look at the numbers, it turns out that the U.S. has an incredible lot more data centers than we're led to believe, and way more than China. As November 2025, the United States has 5,427 data centers, making it the world's largest data center market by a significant margin. Globally, there are approximately 12,000 plus. According to that, that's 45% of the all data centers in the world are in the United States. They're lying to us is the obvious point, guys. And I think this is easy to understand today. They're lying to us about everything. Now, before we go into the article, interesting today that they're going to China, huh? And what have we been told? I mean, first of all, just to laugh at these people as always, even this Twitter platform is calling them out. Benny Johnson, for whatever reason, comes out and says, when Obama visited China, he was forced to exit off of the ASS of the Air Force One because they didn't have stairs for him and they didn't have a carpet. And apparently that's not true at all. I don't, and they call it out for it, even on Twitter. This is why I don't understand. I guess I do, because the point is, these people don't care. They know that someone like me is going to go, well, that's dumb, you're wrong. And they see it down in the chat. They know, they don't care. They don't delete it. The point is that they don't even care that they're wrong. It's not even their job. That's what I argue. It's just weird, though. Because, and the real point is that these people go exponentially grow. Like, I mean, probably not literally exponentially, but the point is they grow rapidly. Even though they're constantly being shown to be wrong. That's the platform doing that. I'm convinced. This person just says, you lie so much. Here's the picture from when Obama landed. And it's just, it's not even worth wasting time on. But the point is to show you these people now going, look at this. It feels good to be respected in the world stage again. Like it's a positive thing, right? Which, I mean, look, at the end of the day, whatever we're talking about, whether it's the worst terrorist in the world or whatever it is, there is a level at which diplomacy should always be possible. Our government has told us that's not the reality. Our government would have said that about Biden or vice versa about, when Trump goes to talk to Kim Jong-un in Russia. Oh, how dare he? Because they want to make it adversarial. The point is, that's how diplomacy works. You're supposed to talk with your enemies. And the reality is, these people are all hypocrites. Here is Benny Johnson. And I said, your daily embarrassing lie aside, weren't you just telling us China infiltrated the United States? Here's one of many. Here's an article he just did, or rather an interview he did, where it's talking about the communist China successfully penetrated state voter ID databases to conduct influence operations. Probably. It wouldn't surprise me. I think they're all trying to do that. The point is not about whether it's real or not. The point is they were telling you this relentlessly. Alex Jones and all the rest. Look at all of them. All of them right now are going, yay. Or really just trying to deflect from why it wouldn't be a compromise or a hypocritical thing to do. They're saying this is what it looks like to be respected. That's kind of like a usual statement they're all making. You think China respects Trump? You think China respects this government? My point is, I don't think they think that. I think that's just what they're being paid to say, or whatever you look at it as, because they don't. It's actually really embarrassing to see the way they're trying to frame this, because China is very much not in support of this. Well, here he is in 2024. Benny Johnson says, top Trump official reveals CCP's plot to flood open border with spies. Okay, so they're sending Chinese spies to the border and infiltrating our country, but we're going to go make deals with them. Got it. I mean, it's no different than what they're doing with Israel, so I guess it makes sense. Here he is. President Trump sends a blunt message to the president of China. Please give my warmest regards to Putin and Kim Jong-un as you conspire against the United States. Okay. But now they're going to be all friends and make deals and stuff. Now, you know what I think is genuinely happening? That Trump is in a tailspin failure right now. And China is something that can make a difference. That's it. That's very embarrassing. He'll frame it as somehow a power move. No, he's weakly going to China, in my opinion, to try to get some kind of a turn with Iran. That's it. That's what I believe. And it could work. I mean, very well, if Trump decides to give them something that's truly like just a wildly beneficial deal, and then even makes a deal with China to make sure that we don't even really fully understand what he gave them, which would be in their interest, and they'd probably do it. And he would get China to then somehow get Iran to I would argue it could end in a way where he frames it as somehow his master plan came to fruition. But I will still argue they end up with losing in regard to what they did with Iran. It's all just my thoughts. We'll see where it goes. Either way, it's pretty sad to watch these ridiculous cartoons act like this is somehow good when they were just telling you China's the one, not Israel. It's China, not Israel. And now they're going, yay, China. We're on the same team. Here's Gunther Eagleman doing the same thing. China just rolled out the red carpet, literally lining the expressway with American flags for Trump. That's not weakness. That's respect. Okay. I hope it feels fun to pretend like you guys are in a good place. And I said, this you? China is not an ally and should be treated with extreme hostility. You just can't make it up. These people are clowns, guys. They're constantly doing stuff like that every single day. Here he is. This is how China's infiltrating America. But now it's all good because we're winning. Okay, well, aside from like making fun of these ridiculous people, Mel points out what Laura Trump put. She says, Team China, and post them all out there, whatever they're doing. And Mel says, if Hunter Biden had posted something like this, the right would have lost its mind. But these grifting as sacks of silicon do it, and no one on the right says a word. Americans can't afford gas, Laura. We don't want to hear about your taxpayer-funded trip to China. Right? But how do you even make sense of this? This is exactly, they were just telling us this is the enemy because they mean nothing. Nothing means anything. What is the thing I used to say? Everything means nothing. Nothing means everything. Like that's a place they drive you where no matter what they say, it's meaningless because it means what he said over here, what Trump actually said yesterday. It's about making nothing mean anything. And then you just check out and they do whatever they want. And I don't mean that in the sense of voting because that's already something they've manipulated. The point is they don't want you to pay attention. Your involvement, your voice, your paying attention is far more influential than the pretending engagement process. Arnaud Bertrand writes, pretty hilarious of him to say that he's going to China with Jensen Huang to ask him to open up the strait. CNBC incorrectly reported, he writes, that the great Jensen Huang of NVIDIA was not invited to the incredible gathering of the world's greatest businessmen, women proudly going to China. In actuality, it's currently on Air Force One. And unless I ask him to leave, which is unlikely, CNBC's reporting is incorrect. Fake news. Isn't it funny how they love to make these small points about little incorrect things, which matter to a degree, but it's because it's like Hegseth or Kash Patel, which I'll point out tomorrow, trying to make a big thing about his $7 tab and then post the actual document, which then proves that Kash Patel was wrong. If you read the document, which says it was about a catering thing for the team. They're all criminals. That's not defending anybody. It's just the fact that they go so hard to make a case about this little thing, which is supposed to make you think that they're right about everything. It's actually the opposite is what it's doing. So in this case, okay, good. They were wrong about the person on the plane. You're still committing a legal war. You're still going, on and on and on. Anyway, the point to cut to the chase, to ask them to open up in regard to the video, when the whole issue is that it's the U.S. that banned the sale of the chips. You can't ask China to reverse your own policies. Now think about how silly that is. So what's the play here? Did he do that to make it look like he got something when he didn't? I mean, I don't even know. Or this is just schizophrenic. It's just lost. I don't know. But overall, it doesn't seem like they have a plan. It seems like they're just flying by the seat of their pants. I hope I'm wrong, even though I don't think they're acting with their good interest, because that's even more alarming. But as Tim Anderson points out, in regard to the reality, as they're flying there to make it look like China respects us and we're on the same team. China is very much not on your side with this. Very much so speaking out against what you're doing. The U.S. government, China, or rather Trump in particular, and is on the side of Iran with this and made that very clear. Has even give instructions to people to ignore U.S. sanctions. So Chinese VLCC heads out of Strait of Hormuz as more countries strike deals with Iran. China, this is about the reality of this is showing you that China is continuing to collaborate with Iran and is driving more people to make agreements to continue to go through the strait that was never closed, restricted to people illegally against them. That's what's happening. So just thinking about that absurd little sidestep and what they're doing with China, for all we know, it's about just trying to stop you from paying attention to their complete tailspin. But before I even get into this, we're not going to talk about Iran more so today, but think about what's happening right now, where they're sort of like in this limbo state where Trump pretends he refused their deal when what actually happened was they said no to him. It's all written down. And he said, I won't even read it. Unacceptable. Well, how'd you know it was unacceptable? He didn't read it. You're a clown. The point is clearly that he got told no and then said, I refuse your no, which is what actually happened. And then Fox News reported that he turned down their deal, because that's what mainstream does. The point, though, is why wouldn't Iran right now be bombing the United States? They're terrorists, aren't they? Aren't they evil monsters that live in caves and they just want to kill children and Jews? Isn't that what you tell us? So why wouldn't they be bombing everybody? Why wouldn't they be taking everything? Because they're not those things, guys. And it's self-evident. Not to say good or bad, right? In the sense of rather, good guy, but they're not what they claim. That is provable. Just like from the very beginning, why they have not bombed the United States, which I'm glad to say they haven't. You've told us for years that they're just frothing at the mouth to go after you, and then you give them a legal opening to do it, and they still don't. It's pretty clear what's happening here in regard to what the U.S. is doing. This relates to China, is about an effort to create illusion that China is in a race with the United States for data centers, I guess, but for AI. And it turns out this, as the article writes, a dark money campaign is paying influencers to frame China AI as a threat. Pretty interesting. Now, why would this be happening? I mean, everything around us right now is this very, like, we've always been propagandized. But in my experience, my opinion, my perception right now, my perspective, we are being propagandized to a degree that is beyond what I've ever seen before. And every single element of everything right now is like this. We're being gamed everywhere. And that's because I think that the second that people start to see through it, the whole thing collapses. That's where I think we're teetering on right now. Now it says, we need to invest in America-made AI to ensure America leads the way. Innovation and job creation is one post made by a paid commentator. Her name is Strale, labeled as the post's advertisement, but she didn't disclose what organization had paid for it. It turns out the funding came from Build America AI, a dark money group tied to leading the future. A $100 million super PAC supported by, and in some cases directly funded by, OpenAI and Palantir. I know, it's like who could have guessed, right? It's crazy. The video is part of a coordinated influence campaign. And by the way, just to say this really quickly, before I even read this, I'd pulled this over because it's very interesting about the China moment right now, but also with the AI direction. I didn't know it was going to be involving AI and Palantir when I decided to include this in the show. And I started to go through it. I said, of course it is. It's just, I think that's very interesting, but it continues. The video is part of a coordinated influence campaign that Build America AI is funding, which is being rolled out on social media in 2 phases. The first focused on working with lifestyle influencers like the person above, who did not respond to requests for comment, to promote a U.S. intelligence to support the U.S. artificial intelligence industry and American innovation. But the second and current phase of the campaign is all about China. Now, remember, the point was that 45% of the data centers in the world are in the United States. And that's everybody else included in one number. So it's the idea that China is close in that is a joke. It's not, unless there's something that we don't see, which is always possible. Marketing agencies are pitching influencers deals. By the way, like Israel was exposed for doing, like everybody involved in politics is doing, such as $5,000 per TikTok video to amplify Build American AI's messaging about how China's technological rise should be seen as a threat. The goal, according to a staffer from SM4, the influencer marketing agency running the campaign on behalf of Build America AI, is to subtly shift public debate by framing China's AI advancement as a serious risk to safety and well-being of Americans. Now, you could look at it 2 ways. You could look at it as they actually believe this and they're spending money to make sure you see it. Or you could argue it's being spent to make sure that you think that, because thinking that is in the interest of the people who are paying them to do it. And it's false. Or I guess you could even leave the false part out, and that second part, or then a third one will be and is false versus not being false. But either way, the second part of that is a manipulation, right? They're paying people, they're funding things that are meant to look like organic content that make you think something that is based on the data centers is simply not the reality. So the question is, why do they want you to do that? Well, I'm sure you guys can, I mean, everything I've been talking about, I think already makes sense, but there's plenty of things you could fit into that. My mind is this is about convincing you that the AI is a national security imperative. And so there's nothing else that matters. Sort of like Trump saying, well, I don't care about what you're dealing with, nuke, even though that's not what's happening. That's how you make that dynamic where you, like Netanyahu's doing the same thing. They make it this all or nothing conversation, right? Well, if we don't get this, then everyone's going to die. So guess there's no conversation. Is everyone going to die? Well, that's the point, guys. That's not what's happening. So they make you think we have to do this. Doesn't matter what the cost, privacy, security, surveillance, technocratic, dark state. It doesn't matter because, China. It says, quote, they want a push to mention China and America as why beating China is so important. And then it said right here that, I read that already. Sample messaging provided by Build American AI to content creators includes lines like, I just learned that China is trying really hard to beat the U.S. in AI. If they do, it could mean that China gets personal data from me and my kids and takes jobs that should be here in the U.S. in the AI innovation race. I'm Team USA. Wow. Now, not only does that feel like out of touch It's like, it's the equivalent of like in the I don't know, like a long time ago where you have these like middle-aged white men in their advertising rooms that have no idea what kids actually want, but think they do. It's like, feels like that. In this case, they're going to get all of my data. It's like, so Palantir is funding, in one case anyway, Palantir and OpenAI, as they listed, funding people to tell you that China might get access to your data while Palantir is literally scooping up your data. Does that not matter? You realize Palantir works with countries all over the world. Palantir has contracts with governments all over the world, including Israel. I'm Team USA. It says the details were later confirmed by several other content creators who received similar outreach. Quote, AI can absolutely be utilized for the betterment of humanity, Murphy says, but this is his comment about this unregulated industry that we have right now, where it's just wacky tech bros that are pursuing greed at the expense of everything else, is just not what it's supposed to be. Well, I'm sure some people disagree. The point is that I think everybody sees that's what's happening right now. That's why you have Lutnick and there's no restrictions, pushing back on states' rights and everything. That Constitution doesn't matter. We have China to worry about, right? Supporters of Leading the Future include OpenAI president and co-founder Greg Brockman, venture capitalist and Palantir co-founder Joe Lonsdale, venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz. It's like they're all perfectly involved. Who could have thought? An AI company, Perplexity, according to the PAC. Leading the Future says it has received $140 million in total contributions and commitments, with $51 million available to spend to push its pro-AI agenda as of April. The news site Notice called the group a massive political war chest for AI industry. Isn't that interesting? The rhetoric provided to influencers echoes long-standing talking points from companies like OpenAI, Palantir, which have pointed to China's AI advances as the reason to boost U.S. AI investment and resist tighter domestic regulations on the technology. Now, again, it may be that Trump repeats that because these people told him that. And that's it. That's the end of the story. That Trump believes it because they said so. And it's not, and what we're seeing is it's actually not the truth. But Trump keeps telling you that we gotta beat China on the AI rate. That's his talking point. Or he knows he's lying. You could decide, but I think that's worth thinking about. It goes on, we're going to be the dominant player, or China is going to be the dominant player. And there will be very different rules depending on who wins. Well, that's terrifying. Palantir Alex Karp says. So essentially we have to pick between your dystopia and their dystopia. Oh, you mean like the lesser of evils on a global scale? Wake up, guys. It's the same thing we're dealing with. And the whole point here is that he's telling you that if they win, they're going to enforce their rules on us, which by default means if you win, you're going to enforce your rules on them. Why is that what anybody in the world allows? Letting a bunch of dictatorial maniacs decide who gets to take over your life and then pretend like the one you got is the winner. It's like, it's insanity. And he's openly telling you. He said this on the Axios show. I'm worried about China, Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, told a group of reporters last year. Tech companies and their executives have also repeatedly argued that advancing American AI is essential to safeguarding democracy. The same democracy that they don't care about and don't believe in. Quote, when we are worried about surveillance, of course, there are huge dangers there, Karp said. But, the old saying that everything before the word but is meaningless. But, you will have far fewer rights if America's not in the lead. And there you go. Same tactic. Rights and stuff. But, if we don't win, then bad stuff. So I guess rights don't matter. Karp, is that that's what he just did. How insane is that? As Trump then goes on to literally not care about your rights. Or Biden, by the way, but that's where we are now. Where people are worried about surveillance, of course, there are huge dangers there. Repeatedly argued advancing AI is essential to safeguarding democracy, right? This is Alex Karp, who's telling you that democracy is a joke, who's telling you, by the way, that we shouldn't live in this, or Andreessen or Thiel telling you we should live in this, what do you call it? Andreessen publicly argued on Joe Rogan about the good oligarchy saving you from the bad oligarchy. That democracy is an illusion that doesn't really exist. He wrote about it in his book. Karp and Thiel are advocating for this direction, and they want you to believe the thing they're building is about safeguarding the idea that they don't believe in. They are laughing at you. These people, it's just like Elon Musk and his MAGA dance. He's like, what do these idiots want from me? What do they want me to be? I'll be that thing and I'll dance on stage for them, but then I'll go do what I want to do. I'm not saying that as I think you people are idiots. I'm saying that's what they feel about every one of us. And at the end of the day, These people don't believe in these things, so they just go, oh, the thing you like, your butterflies and your ponies over there. That's what you're going to get. Shut up. That's his equivalent of what he's doing. Oh, democracy. Yeah, it'll be great. I find that to be insane and obvious to anybody with a brain. So I do want to watch this. I was going to decide if I was going to watch this or not. I want to get to the AI data center part to finish, but I found this revealing. I still don't know where I stand on Vaughn. Like the last thing I said, I feel like, I'll say it afterward, but just like I'm of the mind that there's a lot of people in this field today that are picked, whether they were aware of it or not, to sort of play a role that is easy to ignore. And I actually give him credit I was just watching the other day where he was talking with somebody. And even the fact that he's bringing this up with Vance, it speaks to the fact that despite all of the efforts to manipulate people or use people like Vaughn, that he still sees it to a degree and calls it out. But my point is God bless him for trying to make this point. But I feel like this is exactly the way it was supposed to go. So people look at it and who want to are like, that was just him. Let me play it first. You'll see what I mean. As Murray says, Tucker Carlson did the same thing. This is Vance acting like he doesn't even know what Palantir is. This is my whole point, guys. I mean, he knows that everybody knows about like in the sense of like an abstract general awareness of Palantir being immediately connected to him because it's been a huge talking point. And yet he just fumbles through this like it's some small thing he's not really invested in. That has to be alarming to us.
Palantir company, right?
Yeah.
And that's about a surveillance thing. So this thing is fucked. This sounds crazy.
I think he cusses in here, so earmuffs for the families out there watching the show.
Dude, like this sounds like we're only going to be human for like 2 more years, right? So this is the Palantir company where they're going to build security databases that have all of our
have already built them around us. See, it's things like that matter a lot. But again, I feel like he is doing what he thinks he should. But that's why he's allowed to be in this major influential position, because it's exactly what it is.
Information in them, right? That's what they're saying.
That's what they're saying. Yeah.
And it's going to have like everything. It'll like look at you and know like if you're good at tennis, or if you've ever, if you have $60 in your pocket, or if you're, it can tell if your kids, if your kids can have a limp or whatever, if he'll be in the Christmas play.
Yeah. I actually feel like he did as much as that seems to somebody who's not paying attention, like what the hell did he just say? If you understand what we're talking about, I thought that was actually not bad. The idea of things that are like insane, like that's what I talk about knowing where you'll be next Tuesday at 3:15. You know what I mean? Like that's what the digital twin data managing is about. I'll make that point again in a second for those who don't know what I mean by that. It's very real and active right now. This is one of the main things this is meant to do, is be able to basically map out what people do and algorithmically predict what happens next. That's kind of what he was talking about right there.
You know what I'm saying? It can tell all of that. And that feels real scary, man. Like to a regular guy on the street, that feels like we're going to give our society, like we're going to become these, like they're going to know everything about us. It makes you feel like you won't be a person anymore.
I hear you.
Does that make sense to you?
It definitely makes sense to me. I mean, let me try to explain.
Here's what's funny. If I had said that, or Derek had gone up to Vance at a conference and been like, hey, this Palantir is doing, and he would have laughed at you, right? But so this is the way this is supposed to go. Well, it's like he's, being very kind with someone who doesn't understand what's happening. That's how this is meant to be relayed, And it can sound like that. No, it literally is that. Actually, way, way worse than you described.
So to be clear, I'm not an expert on this particular deal. I actually just read about it earlier today, or maybe yesterday, but the president.
Oh, yeah. Just, yesterday about whatever that P word was. I don't know.
The president did an executive order, I don't know, a couple months ago. And the basic idea is you've got all this different information, but it's not accessible in one place. So
privacy, siloed information, right? That's what that was. And that was the whole purpose, is that, the IRS or the Social Security, like they have individual private siloed databases for privacy purpose, for constitutional rights. And they just said, well, it's difficult. What about immigrants and stuff? Whatever they need to say. And honestly, I don't even think they cared whether we agreed. They just gave a narrative. The Nick Sorters of the world made it sound like they all agreed, and they just run with it anyway. The point is, it was a violation of your rights. And it is there's no going back. They removed the silent information. They gave access to their data bots to just absorb everything. And on the record, Israel has access to it because they're in a strategic partnership to train their AIs. You can't deny this stuff, guys. It's very real. And so that's, real quickly what he said.
Ago. And the basic idea is you've got all this different information, but it's not accessible in one place. So like, let me give you an example where this might be useful.
Okay.
Let's say you catch an illegal immigrant, okay? And that person's using a social security number, but the Department of Homeland Security that arrests the person can't actually figure out what social security number that illegal immigrant is, what name it's attached to, okay? Or
okay. So sure. So we have to have access to everything you ever had. We have to have access to who, like think about what he's saying there. Why, if you arrest one guy who you say is an illegal alien, first of all, if you know that already, why does it matter the other part of it? If you could see what he's saying is we suspect. And so what we need is access to everything all the time to be able to dig through it and find a reason to arrest the guy that we want to arrest, which is what they're doing, which is what Trump keeps doing every day with all the things he's aiming at. That's what James Comey was and all the rest. It's like, go now find something now that we got the momentum going. He's literally telling you that you want to be able to access all of our personal information. So you need to know what Ryan's social security number is in that moment because this guy had one you can't identify. It's a ridiculous argument. At the end of the day, security and your privacy will always and should always trump the government's need to do whatever you want to say next. That's what freedom actually looks like. Liberty, constitutional rights. They just give you these dumb arguments, and people that don't understand what they're actually attacking go, yeah, that makes sense. And I believe in Trump. So I'm going to pretend that makes sense.
Let's say you're like investigating some terrorist and the FBI arrests the person, but
investigating,
there are information about like where the person lived a couple of years ago that you'd like to have. So you'd maybe like to go, talk to their friends or associates or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're arresting. So he's not charged with a crime. You arrested somebody. Right? You may have evidence to go on, or you may have charged with a crime, but the point is you're going through the process. He's not guilty yet. And so what you just said was, well, we want to go and investigate. Okay, fine, go and investigate. But the idea that because you want to investigate this thing over here that somehow we don't have access to, that therefore you should just remove privacy barriers because you want to do that, why does that make sense to anybody? Why would you, because of whatever you're doing, rationalize the removal of everyone's privacy because you want to better investigate this thing that you've yet to actually find guilty? Like, let's see, you could even make a better argument and say that this guy was literally, he's guilty. We proved that he was a trafficker, and we want to now find people that he's connected with and conducted criminal activity with. The argument's still the same, shall not be infringed. But the point is that at least makes more sense. I don't know, maybe he deliberately made it that way, but you have to understand what they're doing. He's trying to make an argument for why Palantir and these private entities should have the ability to access all of your information, but he's framing it as the government. You see what he just did? I mean, that's even more insane than anything. He asked him about a private company who is spying on Americans. And Vance goes on to explain why the government needs those tools. You just made his point, Vance. You just literally made his point for him. But I hope, I guarantee that doesn't get much attention.
Understanding is that it does sound odd, but that what they're trying to do is take all the information that the Department of Homeland Security has, that the FBI has, and just make it so that it's actually not in some hyper inefficient system.
See, that's the manipulative way to say something that was done for your privacy and constitutional rights. But yeah, it sure is inconvenient for an authoritarian government. So, let's do what they want to do.
It's all sort of accessible. And here's the thing. Modern technology is just crazy and weird, and it affects our privacy.
My God, he's talking to you like you're a 3-year-old, Vaughn, and I hope you can recognize that.
And I think we don't have to think that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. It is like a reality of the world that we live in.
It feels like with Palantir, it's like...
Right, so just get used to it. Just shut up, right? I know it's tough and uncomfortable, but just that's what it is now. Next question.
They're going to collect all the information, though, so that feels like...
I mean, look, my understanding again, so this is... Full disclosure.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just the vice president. I'm not involved at all. So just as an outside observer, he and Trump do that every time they can.
Is there somebody else that would know more about it?
I think it's important. I think it's important to be open. So my understanding again. So this is full disclosure because I think it's important. I think it's
know more about it.
You hear what he just said? Good for him. Is there somebody else that would know more about it then? Good for him. I didn't catch that last time I listen to this. So he's the vice president of the United States, and he's going. So is there somebody that does know? Can we get the guy in here, the real guy? So he's embarrassing himself to avoid in answering something they'd always rather be seen as incompetent than criminal.
I think it's important. I think it's important to be open. So Palantir, you asked about Peter Thiel. Palantir is actually one of the companies that he invested in, right? So
he doesn't run
it. My understanding is he doesn't run it.
Oh, good understanding. Yeah.
I don't believe that Palantir is collecting any information. I believe it's purely building a database that's sort of combining the information. I might have some of my team that you guys get. Is that right? Is that
Oh my God, guys.
accurate? Okay.
The fact that he has to live check if it's accurate, that's play acting. You have to understand that. You wouldn't do that. Like it's just, you need to see how alarming it is that this guy who's so obviously interconnected with this, who Steve jokingly calls Peter Thiel's golf club. And there's a reason for that. And I'm going to rehash all of it. You can go through. It's all publicly available. The idea that Peter Thiel, or just let's take the most obvious, that Palantir is not collecting data on you. The fact that he can even think he can say that to an audience that must be aware that if Theo Vaughn is asking about it, that they know about, and he's going to try to get away with that, that's desperation if I've ever seen it. I don't know what else to call it. When you lie brazenly, when you know people know you're lying, that's desperate, guys. What you would take another tack if you thought that was going to look that bad. I just find that insane. And as Murray points out, Tucker did the same thing. Or Alex Jones, that small Palantir thing that Democrats hate. Yes, he famously did that with Nick Fuentes, and he kept trying to walk it back. And as far as I can tell, still to this very day, acts like it's not a big deal. But Glenn Greenwald says Palantir, and I don't mean this as an exaggeration, is the root of all evil. Now, I'm not sure if I would frame it that way, but I think it's important to see somebody like Glenn who's framing this as very objectively, that he sees this as, from a journalistic perspective, a very, very, very serious problem. Carol points out, Palantir's co-founder is apparently upset with this important reporting from New York Times, Chris Christoph, which is one more reason why you should definitely read it. You've seen it. We talked about it. It's this one. Hold on. Oh, I think, you know what I did? I moved that when I changed this around. Hold on one second. I just want you to see the article. I've got it right over here. Remember I told you at the beginning of the show, I pulled off a whole lot of stuff I was going to get into tomorrow. Let me see where that is. It's important just because it's, Did I close it? There it is. It's something we've already covered, and it's really hard to read, but I recommend you do. The silence that meets the rape of Palestinians. The New York Times. Nicholas Kristof. This came out the 11th of May. I mean, every single part of this is documented around the world by multiple organizations. I mean, we're talking like Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International and Doctors Without Borders. And, question all of them. We should. But at some point, you just have to acknowledge, especially since you had Israelis on public live TV in mainstream Israel TV telling you that they were allowed to rape Palestinians and that they should be allowed to, and that people protested for that right. Again, there's no way you can actually deny that. It's public. They debated it. And then we're going to act like we don't know what's happening? That shows you the kind of influence and control this Zionist entity has. And of course, if you want to conflate that with Jewish people, well, you're doing Zionist work for them. I don't think that. I don't think we're talking about anything other than Zionist manipulation over a whole lot of different things in that part of the conversation. But so what they're saying is, here's Joe Lonsdale saying this is false propaganda, citing known lying organizations and a culture that's taught to lie and smear Jews. It's not even about Jews, guys. It's about Palestinians being raped by Israeli military. But of course, he makes it about Jews. It's disgusting. You are the one making that about Jewish people. That's disgusting. Glenn's a Jewish person himself. I agree. This is disgusting what they're doing. So read this, and you should. It's horrifying. I want to play this clip for you before we go on to some of the other parts of this. But my point in showing you all this is these are the same groups that are spying on us, that are manipulating us, that are lying to us in front of everybody. And why I think that's relevant, guys, is these people are gaslighting us around, what I was going to get into right there, and the other part of it was the point about the propaganda piece coming out from Daily Mail, which I'll probably touch on tomorrow. Depends on what happens between then and now. But I don't even need to. You all know this. Max, Air, Mate, they're all talking about it. These are all things we've covered. The idea that they lied to you aggressively about the entire story. And all they've done on Daily Mail, as far as I looked, is just basically read out what they said with no source material, no, basically it's all, so they say, it's basically a resuscitation of the arguments that were made, almost all of which have been proven to be false by even people involved, by their own government, by their own intelligence, by their own teams. And yet they just recite it all again and act like it's, and then they go on to say that this one was false. And that's why, basically, the end of the day was this, the Daily Mail article came out in response to this very well-documented and provable argument about what they're doing in Palestine. And all they did was recite the October 7th atrocity narratives again with nothing to back it up, most of which have been proven false. And guess what? Piers Morgan and Mario Nawfal come out and go, oh, it's a bombshell and it proves everything, like we expected. It's sickening. So back to the point of what we're talking about. Those are the people that are building your AI panopticon around you right now, which should be very alarming. And so what I want you to think about before we get into the data center point about a specific data center being built and what it's doing to a community, here's what Catherine Austin Fitts said with Tucker about what these data centers are. And I played this for you recently, but I want you to hear this before we get into the data center point to finish.
Go back to 9/11, and when Wesley Clark said we're gonna invade 7 countries in 5 years, what you were talking about were the countries where those central banks were not on board to do programmable money. And their governance structures were not on board with essentially, because of Epstein, I'll call it the Rockefeller Rothschild model. There was an effort to say, okay, we're going to basically assert control of the central banks in those countries. That's my interpretation. And I think one of the reasons we're seeing so much tension around Iran is because Iran right now is the big leakage in the system.
How?
So
it's not about their nukes?
No. So, Iran's central bank counts. One of the reasons it counts is because their oil and energy is very important, including for China.
Yeah.
And that's very important in the BRICS system. What the BRICS system is trying to do is to create independent payment systems. But if you're going to come out with programmable money, with digital IDs that are interoperable globally and programmable money that controls in each jurisdiction centrally, you can't afford leakage. And so you've got way too much leakage in the system to proceed with what they're trying to do. And Iran is, and the BRIC nations are a sticking point. And certainly Iran's oil, feeding China gives China greater independence.
So you think that one of the motives behind toppling all these governments was the creation of the control grid we're talking about now?
Right.
Sorry, I'm muted. The point was the idea of the data center building, toppling countries for the data center agenda, for the AI control center agenda. And think about the rest of what we talked about. Think about Honduras, right? Think about the rest of South America and the possible agenda within that and the idea of what this actually represents, right? The toppling of these countries for the initiation of the control. Like if you really think about what we're talking about, like an actual globalist agenda, not the stuff Jones pretends to fight, but the reality of what's actually happening today, the reality of what we can see building and what it would take to actually manage that much data. Well, that's what they're building, guys. That's the point. It's not just about having the data, because as we, at least as we heard and discussed during like the 9/11 post-war conversation, that they got so much data, but they just didn't know where to look. It was all too much, right? And that they'd have it look back and go, oh, well, we had it. We just didn't know it was there. That was a big conversation. I honestly think that was about sort of rationalizing why this was needed, the AI direction needed to happen. But so, the idea now is that we have this, the data, the enough data. And now we have the data centers and the AI algorithms to parse through it and to tell you exactly what you need to know. If that's the way it works, and if Palantir or Israel or whoever else aren't manipulating it from behind the scenes, if it even really is what we were told, like Whitney rightly points out often about whether that is actually even what we have. That it's really just another manipulation of them dictating it behind the scenes, acting like it's some AI thing. However you look at it, it's very clear that the data center rollout and AI part of this is one of their most important agendas. And while they're building the data centers and lying about what's happening with China and building what we can see around us, it has to start clicking together. Like, even if you think they're doing it for good intentions, what happens if another country takes over? What happens if the bad guy Democrats take over? What happens if something shifts and this very dangerous dystopian control center suddenly gets used for bad reasons? Maybe we shouldn't let it get built. That's what I would argue. I'm being facetious for a reason, right? It's like, this stuff is obvious. And I hope that people are coming to terms with it, can start to see whatever you think is guiding it, that this is not some, abstract conversation about reading between the lines. Guys, they're building it. We're watching them. They're telling you. Each part of this is happening live, but is like compartmentalized. So maybe I'm wrong about how it fits together, but hopefully you can stand back like I can and see that the pieces are there and at least acknowledge that. Now, I included my interview with Jorge Morich about this overlap, about the BRICS point, the multipolarity point, because what she frames that in the conversation can be taken as sort of sounding like good guy, bad guy. I don't think that's what she meant it, but just ultimately that is the thing that this current agenda is seeking. But I'll include this to check this out because we had a good conversation about this. Is a multipolar world order the solution or just the next trap? Now, here's a clip that Steve played on AM Wake Up when I was on Tuesday. And it's pretty wild, guys. And this is one story. We've talked about, I think it's Spruce Pines and the idea of the data center taking over the town. It's one example of a lot of them. Of course, it also happened to be a location that had this AI dust. I mean, isn't it funny to think about that now? Again, how far ahead that was in that conversation and where we are now. We were talking about this, in 2024? Was that what it was? This was, October 2024. Spruce Pine Quartz restarts production after Helene in North Carolina. Well, if you remember, the point was we had these grifting mainstream alternative media hype people out there who were said, lithium, it was all about the lithium. And then when you did your due diligence, you found out that the lithium mine was already active before this even started, and that wasn't necessary to make something change. So I thought, okay, well, that was another ridiculous hype. But what happened is I looked further and I noticed that the actual epicenter of the storm, if you were willing to consider the storm was manufactured like they were, then why wouldn't you look at the epicenter, the main point it was focused on, which was Spruce Pine? And what do you know? It was a location that was producing what's called quartz dust. And it was it's one of the only locations in the whole world that has the quality that they need for AI manufacturing. Just a coincidence, I guess. Spruce Pine, look it up. We talked about this many times. And this was and things changed after that. It's just interesting to see how much of this falls into place and how many of us were saying this is concerning. Look at this back there. Not even at points we knew what it connected to, but it got ignored, like a lot of it. But here is a person dealing with this. The data center being built in her home and then being censored, or in her hometown, and then being censored by none other than TikTok for talking about it.
Hello, my name is Ansley. I live in Coweta County, Georgia. We are Noonan, Sharpsburg, Grantville, Moreland, a little bit all together there in Coweta County. I wanted to come on here today and talk about something that happened with my TikTok account. So I made 2 videos talking about how Georgia Power is taking families' homes and properties against their will. One of those being my own family. I have a personal connection to this story, which is why it's so important to me personally. Although nobody in this town wants a damn data center, our commissioners still approved it. So therefore, Georgia Power is using easement rights to force homeowners, longtime homeowners, old homeowners, into selling their family properties and their family homes so they can be torn down and power lines be extended to support these data centers. This is wrong on so many levels.
Right. So we're talking about eminent domain, or at least some variation there of the same argument, right? The idea that they can say, well, we need this for national security. We need this for environmental whatever. And therefore, we can remove you from your land. Like, this is the same point about whether property taxes or something like this, where you don't really own anything in this country, which is kind of it's just an extension of what they're trying to build. Or rather, it will be an extension where we are, what they're trying to build. But that's the point, though, is to think about that, is that they can, if that's even possible, then they can do what they want through that extreme argument. That shouldn't be. That's not, in my mind, that's not legal. That's not constitutional. It doesn't matter, though. We have many things like that in this country that have grown over the long period of time. So if they can just step in and take what they want based on that argument, well, why would that stop them happening anywhere else? But you know what, though, guys? I'm sure it won't happen in Martha's Vineyard.
But when I made these videos to speak out against it, TikTok banned my videos. They said that they're a violation of community guidelines. Wow. I never violated any community guidelines. I only came on here to tell the truth about what's happening in Coweta County, Georgia. This is happening to at least 30 people. Some of them are elderly, cannot handle this on their own. Some of these people have families. Some of these properties have been passed down by generation to generation. This is not an option for Coweta County homeowners. This is something they are being forced to do, even though there are many petitions and other things in place trying to make this stop. Our commissioners still approve these projects. It's wrong. And I feel like people should know that in America, you do not have the right to your land. You do not have the right to your property. They can come and take that from you, and there will be nobody there to help you. And when you speak out against it online, they'll ban your videos. They'll block you. They'll threaten to take away your whole entire account. There is no freedom of speech. There is no protection of property. It doesn't make any sense. And people should know about this. That's all I have to say.
I agree. Right? I mean, it's just the idea that that's even possible is so hard for most people to wrap their minds around. Because of course, the normie, if you will always go, well, it's probably because they had to, an endangered species or whatever. Even that wouldn't be justifiable in my mind. Anything though. But my point is, they'll try to make it. They wouldn't just do it for no reason. Well, yeah, they really would though, for profit, for control, for any number of reasons. If we're actually paying attention to our own history, it's very, very clear, right? It's been there for a long time. Eminent domain is something that's been discussed on the show more than once. And these are it's abused. It's abused for many reasons. I mean, this isn't the same conversation, but it brings to mind something like Flint and their water. The idea that they just decide to route the water source to go to the river because they want to make money, which they did. Nobody was ever been held accountable. I think one person was slapped on the wrist, and that's never been fixed. Not that it matters, because half this country, if not more, is dealing with lead and dioxins and PFAS in their water because our government doesn't care about us. I know it may be hard to hear. It is the reality. It's very clear. She seems to be coming to terms with that. I have reached out to her for an interview. I'll include, here's her TikTok account. But I mean, of course, the obvious point, guys. I mean, you can make the point that needs to be made about what just happened to TikTok. But frankly, I don't think that, that's obviously relevant. That's why that happened, in my opinion, not to diminish that, with Ellison's and the idea of just literally controlling media and what got censored right after it took control. But whether or not he did that, TikTok was already censoring things for the government interest, whether China controlled or whatever it really was before. The point is that at the end of the day, this is about a larger than U.S. agenda. And the data center point is important to these people. And so, and aside from any of that, though, the idea is that she's talking about something that has no violation of guidelines. She's saying these things are being built. I disagree with them. Here's what we should do. And they censor her. How does that not show us where we are right now? How important this is for the larger agenda? Here's where I reached out to her, share this, tag it, get her attention. For all I know, she hasn't seen it. This person followed up saying, to talk to me. But I hope so, because this is an important story. It's a personal story of one person dealing with this, but that it's possible needs to be discussed from a personal point, that it is happening and it can happen to you. Maybe it'll change people's minds. So I'll include this. Make sure you get it out there. Here, I'll give this a little a boost right now. It'll be at the front of my Twitter feed. So get out there and comment on it. I'd like to get her attention so we can get her on here. That'd be great. I believe this is her account here. And then the other one's the TikTok account. For all I know, she doesn't want to do anything. That's why she hasn't responded. But support her work either way. I'm glad that she's calling it out. It needs to be called out. Now, lastly, here's a point that I think is relevant. Kash Patel. Now, you know what I may do? I may just point to this and then use this as a starting point, because we're going to get into some parts about Kash Patel that are really embarrassing tomorrow, which aren't maybe necessarily even that important than what just happened in front of Congress, but it's dishonesty. And I think it's depending on what the context is, what we're talking about that day, just being dishonest, it is an important thing to highlight. But they're always dishonest. So sometimes it's just more about going, look at how ridiculous Kash Patel is. All of them, though. You know, like I see, I don't want to get into it because I want to make the point, but you guys all saw it. We'll go over it later about how embarrassing it was and what he said in front of people. These people are melting down in front of everybody, and they're lying to everybody to hide it. But the point is, independent. The platform. The title is FBI Director Kash Patel claims AI has stopped school shootings. I'm using it everywhere, he says. Everywhere. No, it's not that long. I think this is the one let's just see if I can go through it quickly. The important point about this, and the reason I was thinking about the part I just said is there's another part of this that I would like to overlap with this story, but I guess we'll do it tomorrow. But so here's the article. FBI Director Kash Patel claims the Bureau has been able to stop shootings because of AI. Now, I'm going to point to the one that he's inevitably referencing. Despite his efforts to make sure we don't know which one it was, there's only one shooting that took place in this location at the time he says he stopped it with AI. Looks like he didn't do that, though. We'll talk about it in a second. Speaking to Sean Hannity, Patel claimed that artificial intelligence was never used at the FBI until the second Trump administration. I find that almost impossible to believe. In fact, I know that's actually false because during Trump's administration, the first time, we know, as Bill Barr and the rest, there was an effort to initiate the pre-crime agenda. So he's lying about that too. But what's the surprise, surprise? This guy just wants to make himself look like he's doing better than ever when nobody thinks that. But he says, I'm using it everywhere. Without even, this is what's funny. I think he just wants to brag about how this is great. The people that support him more than anybody, the Republicans, have more concern about that than anybody in the conversation. Whether it's about Palantir, which is what that is and what we're talking about, or the idea that you're using AI elements that aren't even the point is that this is something being introduced into these databases that is weaponized. And we've seen this, whether we're talking about Israeli tech or what Palantir has been shown to do. Quote, we stopped a school massacre in North Carolina because we got a tip and we're able to triage it with artificial intelligence. Patel also claims that an unrelated school shooting in New York was stopped after receiving a tip from private sector partners working on the Bureau's AI infrastructure. Same kind of argument, right? Now we have AI to look through all the information that we weren't able to before. So essentially saying that we weren't ever really doing our job before AI suddenly came onto the scene. Quote, if we had just humans look at it, we would never sift through them all. Later, he boasted that he involved private technology companies in the agency's infrastructure. That's actually what he said. Where was it? Did I close that one? Oh, it's right there, actually. Yeah, I can't believe he said this. This, again, it shows his naivety that he would think this is something you would want to say out loud. So he boasted about involving private technology companies, which means they have access to your private information. He says, quote, I've got every major tech company in the world embedded in the FBI. That's a direct quote from Kash Patel. He then says, rebuilding our internet capabilities, our classified systems, and the ability for artificial intelligence to be in our counterterrorism program so we can get instantaneous results. So what he just told you right there, because it's inevitable that's a part of it, is that Israel has access to your classified systems. I really hope people recognize how clear that is with what we know about what Palantir and, well, look, he says every major tech company in the world, that means Israeli tech companies. But Palantir, OpenAI, all of them are working with Israeli tech, Israeli spyware, all the stuff we've talked about. Which you don't even need that point because at the top of it, it's been made clear that they've put everything on, removed the silos and their strategic partnership with AI with Israel that the DOJ posted shows that they have access to what they're training their models on, which is everything they have access to. Patel added, what's the point of collecting terabytes of data if you can't sift through it? Again, this clumsy idiot just stepped in. Oh, what's the point of collecting terabytes of data on all of Americans? Why are you doing that, Kash Patel? This guy's a clown. And he just is. That's probably why he's going to get thrown to the side, because he makes them look stupid more so than they are. And what we're talking about here is letting all these data companies, private companies, come in and build this out. And thank God we've got someone competent like Kash Patel to oversee that so they don't take advantage of us, right? Patel also says the technology is allowing agents to pop fingerprints immediately and get fugitives and arrest warrants out. So yet again, he does the same thing. What he just revealed right there with his stupidity, the idea that they are actively trying to find things on you in real time, not that they try to get you because they have a crime. Like, you're not supposed to be taking fingerprints unless you have a reason to do so. But he's saying we get fingerprints so then we can get arrest warrants, so we can find a reason to arrest. But we already know they do that. ICE has been caught countless times arresting people and then trying to find a reason to keep them. And one, because they get benefits for that. That came out in a huge story where they got benefits whether or not the person got released. That's one thing we're going to get into tomorrow, which is actually a big story, is how Kash Patel is literally what's not astroturfing, but manipulating his numbers, falsifying the FBI information, basically dumping people on lists to make it look like they just got someone off the top list, or what was the other one? Having FBI agents accompany people who are on arrest they were going to, and then marking that down as an arrest. It's verifiable. People in the FBI are speaking out about it. How embarrassing. ICE is using Palantir's AI tools to sort through tips. It's right there. Here's the guy. And just do your due diligence. Don't take my word for it. But if you listen to what Kash said, and he goes through in his other interview and makes it clear what he was referencing. He references a location. He references a time, or like a date, right? Basically, like he references a date frame where I looked into it, and this is the only shooting I could find in this time frame in this location. So it says Newport man sentenced to 2 years for threatening to shoot up and skin black preschoolers. Now, what's funny is I wonder why they wouldn't want to popularize this one and make sure you understand what they're talking about, because it doesn't fit their model, just like it doesn't fit the model for the left when they do the same thing. So they ignore it. That's what both sides do, because they're all the same thing. Personal agendas, but the same thing. So on March 27, 2026, this lunatic, if he actually did this, which I don't have no reason to believe he didn't, but we should question everything our government does, apparently threatened. A federal judge sentenced Zachary Charles Newell to 2 years in federal prison for communicating online threats. Okay, so we understand this. This guy goes and posts things publicly online that people can see. No investigation needed. Newell threatened to shoot up preschool kids and murder black babies on YouTube. Very public. Associated with his account, right? So on August 27th, he wrote, "I'm going to shoot up black preschool. 20 black babies will be shot and then skinned." That's what he wrote. Immediately upon learning of the threat, the FBI identified and arrested the inmate Newell. Newell admitted to posting the threat and ultimately pleaded guilty. Now, first, based on what they wrote, which is not even accurate, tell me how AI played a factor there. Go ahead, Kash Patel. Walk me through how AI changed that story that was a publicly posted online thing associated to his account, to which you then followed up. You didn't, though. It was local sheriff, and you guys were there when it happened. Very easy to look up. Of course, when they write it, because they're this embarrassing and small, that they have to write that we did it and we arrested them. Guys, look it up. The local police are the ones that arrested him. The FBI were simply there when it happened. And that's how the United States Attorney's Office lies, because they have to think about what a small person that makes you. It's just how petty that is. And also how incompetent you are. You have to glom on to other people's things. Overall, that's what he's using. And so what's the agenda? AI is great. AI has to happen because we have to beat China, or because we're stopping criminals, or whatever, even though none of that seems to be true. Doesn't that seem a little bit alarming? Well, here's a point that'll make it a little bit more so. White House 2026 counterterrorism strategy makes millions of Americans potential targets. Great article from the Free Thought Project, which you should also be supporting. Jason Bassler, part of that as well. Now, I think I'll leave this for now just because I feel like it's a good point to wrap up. But the overall point of this, guys, is you're the criminal. And it talks about anarchists, right? Which, of course, we know is not, and I'll actually read that. It's a direct quote that I've referenced many times. The definition of anarchism. Anarchism really stands for the liberation of the human mind from the dominion of religion. The liberation of the human body from the dominion of property. Liberation from the shackles and restraint of government. Anarchism stands for the social order based on the free grouping of individuals for the purpose of producing real social wealth in order that will guarantee to every human being free access. I read that weird. An order that will guarantee to every human being free access to the earth and full enjoyment of the necessities of earth according to individuals' desires, tastes, and inclinations. Of course, now even point of freeing the mind from the dominion of religion does not mean that you cannot partake. You choose to have faith and you want to engage. That's your choice. The point is removing these control structures from around all of these things, right? If you want property, then you go out there and you do your own thing. The point is removing the body from the dominion of that control structure, the liberation of the shackles and restraints of government. And as always, the only ideology that exists where there's no place for a control structure, I wonder why they want you to think it means chaos. It does not. Chaos means chaos. Chaos is what government gives you, I would argue. But either way, the point is that this U.S. government strategy, which is right here, the United States counterterrorism strategy, is telling you that if you have ideas they disagree with, you're a problem, right? If you're an Antifa member, if you're an anarchist, if you talk about capitalism as a bad thing, if you think governments are a problem, you are a problem. You know, but all those things are supposed to be, what is it called again? I don't know, freedom of ideology, freedom of speech. You know, I'm allowed to express what I think. Oh, not in the free country, though. Not there. It's a joke, guys. It's an insult to pretend like they are in any way representing what we believe this country is. They are the ones destroying it. They're literally lighting the fire underneath as they pretend they're trying to save it. This is a huge issue, but it's not new. I mean, there's documents like this that go back years where it's a similar point. It's just getting harder and harder to miss. So here is Robert Barnes pointing to Sebastian Gorka, the White House counterterrorism czar. You know, counterterrorism. Here's what he has to say, just to make sure we understand that he's in line with the ideas of free speech and liberty. You know, like he himself was screaming that Democrats didn't care about when he wasn't in a position of power.
Things within our laws that you are not allowed to say, right? The freedom of speech does not extend to inciting violence.
It does.
Or threatening the lives
of
specific individuals. That is not permissible.
It is. Period. I mean, you can argue that the government has made a law that says you can't do that thing. Sure, I'll agree with that. Just because the law doesn't mean it's legal. Because the law doesn't mean it's constitutional. And yes, those statements do make sense. Mayberry versus Madison, 1803, the ruling being from the Supreme Court that if it repugnant to the Constitution, it's null and void. Now, we've gone so far beyond where governments have continued to make things that are contradictory to the Constitution, but they don't care. The same reason our Congress doesn't care about an illegal war or many illegal wars, because they are no longer even in control, in my opinion. But the overarching point, guys, first of all, and shall not be infringed, even, talk about fire in a theater, you go. The point is there is a hard line, but everything that pushes that beyond shall not be infringed, beyond inalienable, is a manipulation. Because you can't go, it's inalienable, except when this happens, because then you're stupid, because then you're a hypocrite. You know, fire in a theater, whatever it doesn't matter. You can either argue that we should have limitations on our rights or argue that there are inalienable rights. You can't have a middle ground. So when this clown comes out and says, Democrats hate free speech and they're censoring us, which he was screaming about, then steps into power and says, but you can't say this about Republicans. You can't say this about Christians. You can't say, or whatever he's pointing to. You can't say, put seashells on the ocean about Donald Trump. Now, here's the real point. The argument today is like he made a point to say certain people. Well, of course, today, under the law, if you say the president and make that argument, well, they'll come arrest you. Now, that's the law today. My point is that if we believe free speech, the action is the crime, not saying anything. But I wouldn't argue you should risk that, because these people are belligerent authoritarians and they will kick your door down and make sure you understand that you're not allowed to say it. But that's what we're fighting to change, you understand? Is fighting, one, to get people to realize that that's where we are, and two, to change it to actually embody what we believe it should be, the constitutional reality it should be. Or the other point he says, though, which one was it again? Hold on. It's
things with to inciting violence.
Inciting violence. Okay. So I stand up and I say, I mean, I don't want to try to make it abstract. The point is, guys, it's a subjective thing. So if you want to argue I'm inciting violence, well, they say that. They say people yelling free Palestine is inciting violence, don't they? And maybe they are. Maybe they're screaming free Palestine as they're, doing something that initiates violence. The point is that it's not about the words. It's about the action, right? If I'm going up and I'm punching somebody, well, I'm initiating violence. I'm inciting violence. If I'm simply saying things, I'm not inciting violence. If people go out and do things after I say things, they're inciting violence. The idea that you can ever argue that me being engaging in my constitutional rights, no matter what I'm saying, is somehow a crime if and when bad things happen afterward, it's manipulation. Now, look, again, we can have a conversation about this. If you argue that obviously if I say something intended to make you do something, and there you get to the defining factor of how you know I meant to do it or intended something, then make the argument. Make the argument that we should have limited rights in this context. Be honest about it. I'll be willing to listen to you. Maybe you'll even convince me. The point is, no one's saying that. No one in this conversation is going, I'm arguing for limited rights. They're all pretending they fight for free speech and all the rights, but then go, but, and if, how, but fire the theater, asterisk, except a pathogen. We've all seen it. We all know what's happening. And Gorka is just the newest hypocrite in the long, never-ending procession of government hypocrites. Now, to finish, here is the king telling you what's going to happen next.
My ministers will also proceed with the introduction of digital ID that will modernize how citizens interact with public services.
Ah, good. And as Propaganda & Co. writes, the king has ordered his peasants to accept the dystopian surveillance state. Welcome to technocracy. I mean, the obvious...
My ministers...
First of all, just the weirdness of in 2026 of having this old man with his weird crown acting like we're in a democracy. You know, it's like, it's strange. I mean, I get it's some archaic thing and, you know, it's weird. Even people, I mean, anyway, it's not even worth getting into. It's just a strange thing that ties back to what I think really still draws a lot of power in this world, which is their belief on bloodlines and influence and eugenics at the end of the day. The point, though, is that this is somebody dictate about digital ID. Well, there you go. It's something we were all fighting. It's something that, in a sense of this conversation and people that watch this show and people on the right, we're fighting this very big problem. The idea of what it's building and what it does and the lack of privacy and the reality of surveillance and the ability to be able to turn off your money and shut you out of society, which is what it will do. It's what they've designed it to do. And Trump is happily rolling it out. I just want people to realize where we are. Because like we keep talking about, even like we did, like right now is a moment to try to stop that. Like was a moment in 2024 when we were saying, we see this going this way. Had we collectively as a society actually said, yes, that's happening, let's stop it. Maybe we could have. So right this moment, it's possible that we could stop what's happening next if we do something now. And I don't mean violence. I mean becoming active in this conversation, not left, right, active in an honest, nonpartisan, objective way, and call it out. Go out and protest, make your own shows, petition your politicians, do whatever you think makes a difference, but start doing something. Because if standing back and letting the screaming morons out there convince the other honest people that they might actually be right, it does have an effect. Your voice makes a difference. What you say online, what you do everywhere, where you speak out, what you say in the line at the grocery store, it makes a difference. Don't forget that, right? One person. I mean, I say this all the time. I think about it every day. If we can affect one person's mind doing this show, if I can get one new person to understand, not just to think what I think, but at least to understand what we're trying to relay, and at the very least to question the beliefs that they hold and consider what we're discussing, then I consider that a success. And I believe my point is that I think we're right in what we're talking about. And so I'd like to believe that getting people to understand what's happening, one person, that's all it takes. So thank you for tuning in today. Continuing to fight. If you want to support this platform, down below, links for you to do so. We need your support. Thank you for tuning in. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.